Tonight we enter a quiet room of clay, lamplight, and unanswered questions. In 1902, fragments from ancient Mesopotamia began moving through museum storerooms, wrapped in paper and numbered like sleeping bones. Some came from Nippur, some from Uruk. Some arrived cracked, burned, or scraped by centuries of burial. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania, Oxford, and the British Museum have spent generations reading these marks, one wedge at a time. And tonight you are asked to imagine one particular tablet. Not a golden treasure, not a royal crown, just clay. Its surface is small enough to rest in a human hand, yet its broken lines seem to whisper about something far larger, something older than kings, older than temples, older than the stories people tell when they want history to behave politely. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows still, you may leave your country, your city, and your local time in the comments. Somewhere else, another listener may be drifting beside you. You settle deeper now, while the tablet waits. The air around it feels dry, almost powdered. You can imagine the smell of old clay, dust, and wooden cabinets polished by careful hands. The lights above the museum table are soft and steady. Nothing dramatic happens. No thunder, no curse, no door slams open by itself, which is always disappointing for the impatient among us. Instead, there is only the patient work of translation. A scholar bends close to the surface. Another checks an older copy. A third compares the wedge marks with known Sumerian signs. The process is slow because the dead do not usually speak clearly. They murmur. They lose corners. They let one important word break exactly where everyone wishes it had survived. That is history being rude. The tablet is sometimes called forbidden, not because guards chase people away from it, but because its meaning feels uncomfortable. It does not praise a king. It does not count sheep. It does not record a temple ration. Ordinary tablets often do those things, and those ordinary things are precious. They tell us how people lived, ate, traded, married, argued, borrowed, and complained. Humanity has always complained, but this tablet appears to belong to another category. Its surviving phrases seem more ritual than practical, more memory than account. It speaks of humans as if they were once closer to something vast, then separated from it. It suggests forgetting not as a weakness, but as an event. That is the first quiet disturbance. You're not standing before a story about people slowly losing knowledge through time. You're standing before a suggestion that memory may once have been shaped, limited, and sealed. Perhaps not in the literal way a door is locked. Perhaps in the way a child is guided away from a fire. Perhaps in the way a society decides some truths are too heavy for ordinary daylight. The mainstream fact beneath this dream is firm enough to hold your weight. Sumerian is the earliest known written language, yet widely accepted by scholars. Its signs were pressed into clay in southern Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago. University collections in America and Britain hold tens of thousands of tablets, many still unpublished or only partially studied. That number matters. It means the ancient world has not finished speaking. It also means any single fragment can change shape when placed beside another. A broken line in one museum may answer a broken line in another. A list of gods may illuminate a hymn. A school exercise may preserve an older myth, copied by a bored student who probably wanted to be anywhere else. You can almost see him. A young scribe sits cross-legged on a reed mat. His hands are dusty. His reed stylus leaves neat little wedges in wet clay. Outside, sunlight hits the city wall. Donkeys complain in the street. Someone grinds barley. Someone argues over beer. Life moves with its usual mixture of sacred purpose and minor irritation. Yet the student copies words older than his own city. He may not understand them fully. His teacher may not explain everything. Some lines are recited because they have always been recited. Some phrases are preserved because tradition is a deep river, and people often carry meanings long after they have forgotten the spring. The tablet's opening survives only in fragments. The translation is cautious because honest scholars move carefully. It speaks of the time when humans held the noise of the sky, or perhaps carried the speech of heaven. The sign is debated. One reading suggests sound, another suggests command, another, more delicate, suggests memory. And there, the mystery begins to breathe. What does it mean for humans to carry heavenly speech? Is it poetry? Is it priestly metaphor? Is it a trace of some older ritual language? Or is the tablet describing a mythic age when human beings remembered their origin too clearly? A debate among specialists remains open here. Some see such passages as temple theology, designed to explain human service to the gods. Others suspect that fragments of much older oral traditions were woven into later Sumerian writing. A few careful voices warn against turning every damaged line into a grand revelation. They are right to warn us. Still, even caution has shadows, because the ancient texts do return, again and again, to the same strange pattern. Humanity is made. Humanity serves. Humanity becomes noisy. Humanity is limited. The gods arrange the world, then complain that the arrangement has become inconvenient. It is all very administrative, which somehow makes it more believable. Divinity with paperwork is hard to dismiss. You listen as the translator follows the marks. One line mentions the first clay. Another line refers to those who were set below. The phrase could mean workers. It could mean humans. It could mean beings placed beneath a higher order. The tablet does not explain itself. It leaves you with the sensation of overhearing a conversation through a wall. The room feels cooler now. Beyond the glass, the tablet rests under controlled light. Its edges are worn. Its centre is marked by the pressure of a hand long vanished. That hand did not know you. It did not know museums, cameras, subtitles, or people falling asleep to ancient history on glowing screens. Yet somehow, across all that distance, it reaches you. The quirky tidbit is small but charming. Some ancient Mesopotamian scribes made mistakes and corrected them directly in the clay. Others copied model texts so badly that modern scholars can almost hear the teacher sighing. Even in the shadow of temples, education had its little tragedies. You smile softly at that. Then the smile fades, because the tablet's next preserved phrase is stranger. It describes a command sent down into the people, followed by a line that may be read as their inward knowing was covered. Not destroyed, not removed, covered. A covered thing still exists. A buried lamp is still a lamp. A sealed room is still a room. A forgotten name may still wait somewhere behind the tongue. This is where the story becomes less about ancient gods and more about you, lying quietly in the modern night, feeling the old questions settle near your breathing. What have humans forgotten? Not the small things, perhaps. Not how to bake bread, count sheep, build walls, or gossip efficiently. Those skills survived very well. The forgetting hinted here is older and deeper. It concerns origin, purpose, and the shape of the unseen order. It concerns why human beings wake beneath the stars with hunger, intelligence, longing, and confusion all packed into the same fragile body. Perhaps the tablet is only myth. Perhaps myth is only another form of memory. The lamplight remains steady. The clay remains silent. Yet its silence does not feel empty. It feels arranged, like a covered doorway in a wall no one remembers building. And you remain there, quietly listening, while the first lines of the forbidden tablet begin to open. Your mind drifts toward the southern plain, where the rivers move like dark threads through a world of heat. The city is not yet a ruin. It breathes, it sweats, it stands beneath a pale sky, its walls made from sun-dried brick, its streets narrowed by the press of people, animals, baskets, jars, and gossip. You feel the ground under your feet, packed hard by sandals and bare heels. Dust clings to your ankles. The air tastes faintly of salt, river mud, smoke, and dates drying in courtyards. Uruk rises ahead of you. It is one of the great early cities of Mesopotamia, and archaeology confirms its importance with a quiet authority. Excavations have shown that Uruk grew into a vast urban centre during the 4th millennium before the Common Era, with monumental temples, administrative buildings, and some of the earliest known writing. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the Oriental Institute in Chicago have long treated Uruk as one of the places where city life became unmistakably visible. Yet visibility is not the same as understanding. You pass through a gate where guards lean in the shade, half alert and half bored. Even ancient security had its moods. A cart creaks by, loaded with reeds. A woman balances a jar against her hip. A child stares at you with the suspicious calm of someone who knows visitors are always lost. Somewhere, a sheep objects to existence. The city is alive with small sounds. Sandals slap against packed earth. Potters turn clay. Bakers pull flat loaves from domed ovens. Reed doors whisper open and shut. Above all of it, the temple platform climbs toward the sky, pale and severe, like a staircase built for beings who dislike mud. You smell bitumen near a workshop. You smell fish from the river. You smell smoke from cooking fires. The senses gather slowly, and the world becomes less like an illustration in a book. It becomes a place where people wake tired, worry about grain, love their children, fear sickness, and stand under stars they cannot command. That is the first tenderness of ancient history. It reminds you that the past was not made of symbols, it was made of bodies. The temple district stands apart, yet it is not separate from daily life. It organises the city's breath. Grain comes in, beer goes out, labour is counted, offerings are arranged, names are pressed into clay. The gods receive food, cloth, oil, and song, while people receive order, belonging, and occasional bureaucracy, which is less romantic but extremely durable. Records from early Mesopotamia confirm that temples were not only religious spaces, they were also economic institutions that stored goods, directed workers, and managed land. The earliest writing itself appears closely tied to counting, administration, and accountability. It is a practical birth for something so mysterious. Humanity invented writing, in part, because someone wanted to know where the sheep had gone. There is almost comfort in that. You walk deeper into the city toward the place where scribes work. The room is shaded and close. Reed mats cover the floor. Clay tablets sit in rows, some wet and soft, some drying near the wall. A teacher's voice moves through the air with tired precision. Students press wedges into clay with cut reeds, learning signs by repetition until hand and memory become one motion. The sound is delicate. Tap, press, lift. Again, here. Forgetting becomes physical. A student fails to remember a sign, and the teacher corrects him. A list is copied, then copied again. A word survives because someone repeats it. A word dies because someone stops. Memory is no longer only inside the mind. It is outside now, lying on clay, vulnerable to fire, flood, theft, boredom, and the tragic enthusiasm of future excavators. The tablet's world begins in such rooms, not in fantasy darkness, but in the ordinary discipline of trained hands. A forbidden idea does not need a forbidden chamber. It can hide inside a lesson, inside an old hymn, inside a phrase copied so many times that no one asks why it is there. This is how deep memory survives. It dresses itself as routine. You step outside again, where the heat presses softly against your face. A canal cuts through the settlement, reflecting a strip of sky. Men guide boats loaded with reeds and jars. The mud along the bank is black and shining. Flies gather with ancient confidence. No civilization, however magnificent, has ever defeated flies. There is the gentle sarcasm of the earth. The city claims order, but the marsh is nearby. Reeds sway beyond the fields. Birds lift from the water in sudden bursts. The river gives life, yet it also threatens to take it back. This landscape teaches humility. It teaches people to measure, store, pray, and rebuild. It teaches that memory must be made durable, because mud forgets quickly. A quirky tradition clings to this marshy world. Later Mesopotamian stories speak of strange sages connected with the waters, figures who bring crafts, laws, and knowledge to humankind. Some later accounts imagine them with fish-like qualities, as if wisdom itself came damp from the deep. Serious scholars treat these traditions carefully, but the image remains wonderfully odd. Imagine receiving civilization from someone who looks freshly disappointed by dry land. Still, beneath this strangeness sits a pattern. Knowledge comes from elsewhere. Knowledge is delivered. Knowledge is supervised. That pattern matters as you stand beneath the temple shadow. The city's architecture tells you that life is arranged in levels. The fields lie low. The houses rise slightly. The temple rises higher. The gods occupy the highest thought in the city's mind. Even the streets seem to lean toward them. But what lies beneath? Beneath the paving, older walls sleep. Beneath the older walls, post holes and ash. Beneath those, other traces, more fragile and more uncertain. Archaeologists have shown that early Mesopotamian cities developed from long processes of settlement, irrigation, trade, and social organization. Yet the myths often compress these slow changes into sudden gifts. A city descends from heaven. Kingship is lowered. The arts of life arrive already shining. The debate remains open among historians of religion and ancient Near Eastern scholars. Some read these traditions as symbolic explanations of social order. Others see them as cultural memories of real technological transformations, later dressed in divine language. A few suggest that myth preserves psychological truths more than literal events. The earth offers fragments. Interpretation supplies the fragile bridge. You feel that bridge under your feet. It is narrow. The sun lowers, and Uruk changes colour. Mudbrick turns gold, then rose, then brown. Smoke thickens in the lanes. From a courtyard, someone sings in a low voice while grinding grain. The rhythm is steady enough to calm the heart. The city is not thinking about your mystery. It is cooking, counting, washing, bargaining, and preparing for sleep. Yet in the scribble room, a damp tablet waits. Its signs are pressed but not yet dry. The words hold a shape that might last thousands of years, provided no one drops it, reuses it, steps on it, or files it with tax disputes forever. A small survival, resting on chance. You imagine the scribe lifting his stylus. He has copied a line about human knowing being covered. Perhaps he understands it as theology. Perhaps he thinks it is old and strange. Perhaps he's mostly hungry. But his hand still moves. The clay receives the marks. Outside, the last light fades behind the river plain. And somewhere within the ordered city, beneath it smells of bread, smoke, mud, and warm animals. The idea of forgotten memory sinks quietly into earth. For a moment, it feels as though the broken lanes begin speaking from inside the clay, not loudly, never loudly. Clay has better manners than that. It speaks by absence, by fracture, by the little wounds where a sign should be. You lean close in the mind's quiet museum, and the tablet offers what it can. A wedge, a gap, a phrase, a name half preserved, like someone calling from beneath a heavy door. The first surviving cluster describes the people of the lower clay. The wording is uncertain, but the image is clear enough to trouble the room. People are not described as heroes, kings, or founders. They appear as formed beings, placed below, close to mud, close to labour, close to the damp world of canals and bricks. You feel the weight of that. A mainstream fact gives this scene its firm ground. Sumerian creation stories often connect human beings with clay, labour, and service to the gods. Scholars at Oxford and the University of Pennsylvania have studied myths where divine beings organise the world, then create humans to take on the burden of work. The ancient idea is not flattering, but it is honest in its own cold way. Humanity begins as help. The tablet does not unfold like a modern story. It does not explain motives neatly. Ancient texts rarely care whether you are comfortable. They assume you already know half the tradition, then punish you for arriving late. A line may mention a divine command without naming the god. A sentence may refer to a ceremony whose details are lost. Another may use a word with 3 possible meanings, all of them inconvenient. History can be petty. Still, you follow the marks. One phrase suggests that humans once heard the great measure. This could mean a cosmic order, a divine instruction, or a sacred pattern used by priests. The translator pauses there, because Sumerian terms often carry several layers. A measure can be a rule. It can be a song. It can be the proportion by which heaven, temple, field, and body are joined. The tablet then turns darker. It speaks of noise rising from humankind. Not merely sound, perhaps, but disturbance. The people multiply. They work. They gather. They ask. They remember. Their speech grows thick beneath the sky, and the higher powers grow uneasy. The line is damaged exactly where the motive might have appeared, which feels almost theatrical, though ancient clay does not care about drama. You are left with fragments. Humans held something. Humans became loud. A covering was sent. The simplicity of it is unsettling. It resembles a memory of correction, not punishment in the obvious sense. There is no battlefield, no heroic defiance, and no flaming weapon. Only a decision made above human understanding, followed by a narrowing within the human mind. The tablet's broken phrase for this narrowing may be read as the inner ear was filled. Another possible reading suggests the heart's storehouse was closed. In Mesopotamian thought, the heart could be a place of intention, feeling, and understanding. So the line might not speak of emotion alone, it may speak of cognition, awareness, and the deep place where meaning settles. A closed storehouse is not empty. That is the unsettling mercy of the phrase. Something remains inside. It is locked away. The contents are not gone. They have simply become inaccessible under ordinary conditions. Dreams might touch them. Ritual might circle them. Poetry might brush against them in the dark. The tablet gives another clue, a reference to sleep placed upon names. This phrase is delicate and strange. Names in Mesopotamia were not casual labels. Names carried identity, destiny, and ritual force. To place sleep upon names could mean erasing lineage. It could mean concealing divine names. It could mean preventing humans from remembering what they once were called. You let that settle. What would it mean to forget your first name? Not your personal name, but the name of your kind. What would it mean for humanity to walk through fields, cities, temples, and wars while carrying a buried title no one can pronounce? The scholarly debate around such phrases remains cautious. Some experts interpret symbolic sleep as a poetic way of describing mortality or ignorance. Others argue that it reflects temple initiation, where secret knowledge was restricted to trained ritual specialists. A smaller fringe of writers claim it preserves memory of a deliberately hidden prehistoric order. Careful historians do not accept that last claim as fact, yet they sometimes admit the language is unusually suggestive. And suggestive is enough for tonight. The tablet's tone is not angry. That may be the strangest part. It does not read like a rebellion text. It does not scream that humans were wronged. It carries the calm of something recited within an accepted order. The forgetting is terrible, perhaps, but also official, a bureaucratic veil lowered over the mind. You can almost imagine the divine clerk. He sits somewhere beyond the visible sky, licking a stylus, misplacing a cosmic tablet, and deciding that humans have been asking too many questions again. One does hope the heavenly archive had better labelling than some earthly ones, but ancient myths offer no guarantee. The quirky tidbit arrives from the scribal world itself. Some Mesopotamian school tablets preserve teacher and student exercises on opposite sides. On one side, the master writes a clean model. On the other, The student attempts the same signs with varying degrees of success. The result is painfully human. Even the transmission of sacred language depended on someone not smudging homework. That fragile transmission matters here. The tablet's damaged lines may have passed through many hands. A priest might have recited an older version. A temple scribe might have adapted it. A student might have copied it as an exercise, not knowing he preserved a dangerous little door in the wall of time. The forbidden quality may not have been marked by secrecy, but by misunderstanding. A forgotten truth can hide in plain sight. The next phrase mentions those who stood beside the first labour. These may be gods, lesser divine workers, or mythic figures between gods and humans. The line suggests witnesses. Someone saw humanity at its beginning. Someone remembered the arrangement. Someone preserved the story of why humans no longer remember it themselves. There is a quiet irony here. A tablet that says humans forgot has itself almost been forgotten. It survives not as a complete revelation, but as a wounded surface. Fire hardened it. Earth covered it. A shovel found it. A cataloguer numbered it. A scholar squinted at it. Now you lie in the dark, listening to its fragments become a story again. That is not proof of anything grand. It is still remarkable. The clay does not hand you certainty. It gives you a mood, a structure, and a repeating pattern, formation, knowledge, disturbance, covering, silence. These are not wild inventions. They belong to the deep grammar of Mesopotamian myth, where the gods arrange both cosmos and society, and where humans live inside limits they did not choose. The room grows still again. The tablet rests under the glass, its broken signs holding their breath. You do not need to force it into certainty. You only let its phrases gather slowly, like dust on a windowsill. The people of clay, the great measure, the rising noise, the covered knowing, the sleep upon names. Each fragment is small. Together they feel like a door beginning to remember its hinges. In your ears, the echo changes into the sound of a king list being read at dusk. The voice is slow, formal, and almost too calm. It does not hurry through the names. It lets each ruler pass like a shadow across a wall, each reign measured, each city placed in sequence, each dynasty folded into the next. You listen, and the list seems orderly at first. Then the numbers begin to stretch. One king rules for thousands of years. Another rules even longer. The tablet does not blush. Ancient Mesopotamian king lists are real texts, copied in scribal schools and studied by modern historians. The Sumerian king list, known from several versions, preserves a sequence of rulers and cities where kingship moves from place to place. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of California have treated it as a complex blend of political memory, myth, and ideology. Its strangest claim is simple. Kingship descends from heaven before ordinary history begins. You stand in that phrase as though beneath an open night sky. Kingship does not slowly develop in the mythic memory. It is not invented by councils, farmers, warriors, merchants, or tired administrators with too many barley accounts. It comes down, it arrives. It is lowered into the human world like a weight, a gift, or a burden. That changes the air. A human institution becomes part of a cosmic event. Rule is not merely political. It is arranged above the plain. Cities do not simply rise from mudbrick and ambition. They receive something older than themselves. In the language of the list, civilization begins with descent. You walk through a time that no living person remembers. There are no familiar kings yet, no famous empires, no carved palace reliefs of armies crossing rivers, no bronze helmets glittering under a hard sun. There is only the early plain, dim and immense, with marshland breathing at the edges and villages gathered near water. The world feels young, but not empty. It feels watched. The hidden timeline begins here, in the gap between what archaeology can touch and what ancient memory insists upon. Excavated layers show gradual settlement, irrigation, storage, craft specialization, and growing complexity. Yet the mythic texts remember a prior order already operating. They speak as if the structure of power existed before people understood it. Perhaps that is theology. Perhaps that is memory shaped into sacred form. Perhaps it is both. A council decree does not survive from the first dawn of kingship. No clay document says, in tidy wedges, that history begins now and everyone should kindly behave. Instead, you have later copies, older traditions, political claims, and impossible reigns. The result is neither simple fiction nor simple record. It is something more difficult, and therefore more interesting. A scholarly debate continues around this point. Some historians read the enormous reigns as symbolic markers of legendary time. Others see the list as a tool used by later rulers to organize rival cities into one grand pattern. A few suggest that the unbelievable numbers encode cosmological cycles, not ordinary lifespans. The careful answer remains layered, because the evidence is layered, and layers are where old things hide. You feel the tablet's world widening. Human forgetting is no longer a private event inside the mind. It belongs to a wider chronology, one divided between remembered time and unremembered time. After the first kings, the numbers begin to shrink, reigns become less impossible. Names grow closer to historical texture. The sky seems to lower itself into human scale. Before that, everything is vast. The long reigns act like mist. You cannot walk through them as you walk through documented history. They resist ordinary time. They suggest that ancient scribes did not imagine the earliest ages merely earlier. They imagined it as different, longer, heavier, closer to divine presence, less broken into the familiar human days of planting, eating, aging, and complaining about neighbours. It is a different kind of time. A quirky fringe tidbit has hovered over these numbers for more than a century. Some modern enthusiasts have tried to compare the impossible reigns with astronomical cycles, hidden calendars, or even lost prehistoric dynasties. Most professional scholars reject such claims when they leap beyond evidence. Still, the urge itself is revealing. These old numbers make people feel that something has been concealed inside arithmetic. The list invites that feeling. It says, calmly, that before the flood, kings ruled for spans no human body can bear. It then places a great rupture between that world and ours. The flood becomes not just water, but a boundary in memory. On one side, vast reigns and cities touched by divine descent. On the other, shorter lives, smaller certainties, and history that begins to look familiar. You sense the old pattern forming. There is a before that is too large. There is an event that divides. There is an after where humans remember less. The forbidden tablet belongs inside that same atmosphere. Its suggestion of covered knowing feels less isolated when set beside the hidden architecture of early tradition. Ancient texts repeatedly imagine that human society began under arrangements made by powers beyond humans. They also imagine that something later narrowed, broke, flooded, or withdrew. That withdrawal matters. In temple hymns, gods may abandon cities. In laments, divine favour departs like warmth from a dying fire. In myths, gifts may be distributed and then limited. The world of the gods is not always present in the same way. It approaches, recedes, hides, returns through ritual, and demands offerings like a difficult relative with excellent taste. The ancient divine household was complicated. As you listen to the king list, the names pass slowly. Eridu, Bad Tibera, Larak, Sipa, Shurupak. Even in English, the names feel like stones carried from a riverbed. They are city names, but also mood names. Each one holds a suggestion of walls, canals, shrines, granaries, and voices lost in open air. One city receives kingship, then another, then another. This movement creates a system. Kingship is not owned forever. It travels. It can be bestowed, removed, and reassigned. That idea would have comforted some rulers and terrified others. It also reflects a deep Mesopotamian view that earthly order depends on decisions made beyond ordinary sight. You stand at the edge of that order. The hidden timeline does not ask you to believe every ancient number literally. It asks you to notice how the ancients arranged memory. They placed a mist-filled age at the beginning. They gave it divine proximity. They set a rupture between that age and human history. Then they let later kings claim descent from that arrangement, as if power itself remembered what people had forgotten. That is subtle. That is effective. It is also faintly unsettling, because it means forgetting can serve authority. If people no longer remember the first arrangement, they must trust those who claim to interpret it. The temple, the palace, the scribe, the ritual expert. Each becomes a keeper of partial memory. The common worker lives beneath the system, feeling its weight but not seeing its origin. The wind moves across the plain. Night settles over canals and reed beds. In the darkness, the king list keeps speaking, name after name, city after city, impossible year after impossible year. The words do not give you proof of a lost world. They give you a map of how ancient people imagined one, long before recorded history became narrow enough for dates. The old texts placed humanity in the shadow of an earlier order, a time no longer remembered, a time measured in numbers too large for sleep, a time when kingship descended, cities were chosen, and the human mind may not yet have been fully covered. The voice fades. The list remains for a moment. The plain grows silent enough for decisions to descend. You sense a gathering above the fields, not in clouds of fire, but in the older calm of authority. The air feels measured. The river keeps moving, but more quietly now, as though even water understands that something formal is taking place. Far below, villages smoke in the evening, reeds lean and lift, birds settle into the marsh. Above it all, an assembly forms. The ancient texts often imagine divine life through councils, commands, debates, and decrees. This is not chaos disguised as religion. It is government projected onto the cosmos, or perhaps the cosmos imagined as the first government. Either way, the pattern is unmistakable. Important matters are discussed. Roles are assigned. Responsibilities move from one being to another. A mainstream fact steadies the image. In Sumerian and Akkadian traditions, major gods gather in assemblies to determine destinies, grant kingship, and shape human affairs. Scholars at the University of Chicago, Harvard, and Oxford have studied how these divine councils mirror ancient political institutions, especially assemblies of elders, rulers, and temple authorities. The divine world has meetings. One hopes there were snacks. Still, the idea is powerful. Human society does not appear as an accident in these traditions. It is placed inside a structure. The fields have overseers, the cities have patrons, the seasons have rhythms, the rivers have terrifying moods, which no committee seems fully able to manage. The dead have their own realm. Even disorder has a place, though usually an inconvenient one. You listen as the council arranges the world. The first concern is labour. Canals must be dug. Fields must be watered. Bricks must be formed. Temples must be fed. The gods of the old stories are not always floating abstractions. They require houses, offerings, songs, and proper attention. Divine presence comes with maintenance. Like all important institutions, it produces paperwork. The lower world waits. A decision passes through the assembly. The heavy tasks must be transferred. The lesser beings who once carried the burden are weary. Their complaint rises like dust. Their hands are worn. Their patience is gone. The council hears them and seeks a solution that will preserve order without disturbing comfort at the top. This part feels painfully familiar. Ancient myth can be very honest about hierarchy. It may speak in divine names, but its bones are social. Someone works, someone benefits. Someone explains why the arrangement is sacred. Someone at the bottom is told the system is ancient, necessary, and probably good for character. You breathe slowly. The tablet's hidden atmosphere now sharpens. If humanity is made within such a council, then forgetting may not be random decay, it may be policy. The first humans are not merely alive, they are situated. They are given work, boundaries, and a place in the layered order. They exist beneath decisions they did not witness. The council above the plane does not hate them. That may be worse. Hatred would be simple. Cruelty would be easy to recognize. But the old myths often present divine limitation as administration. Human suffering may appear as inconvenience, adjustment, balance, or necessity. The council does not need to rage. It only needs to conclude. A decree falls softly. Humans will labour. Humans will build. Humans will remember enough. That last phrase is not written so plainly. Of course, it is the shape implied by the fragments. Human beings need skill, language, cooperation, and ritual memory. They must know how to plant, count, carry, obey, make offerings, and raise children. Too little memory, and society collapses. Too much memory, and questions begin. Questions are dangerous little animals. They breed quickly. The council must define the human mind like a field boundary. Here is permitted knowledge. There is sacred knowledge. Beyond that lies the territory of gods, kings, priests, and those trained to walk carefully near power. The common person may sense the boundary, but not cross it. This is not only mythic imagination, it resembles how many ancient societies handled knowledge. Ritual expertise was often restricted. Writing itself could be a gate. A council decree proves nothing here in the modern legal sense, because no original divine minutes have been recovered, which is careless of them. Yet administrative tablets from Mesopotamia show that real institutions loved classification. Workers, rations, animals, offerings, fields, and duties were recorded with disciplined precision. The same cultural mind that organized barley could imagine a cosmos organized by decree. The quirky tidbit is charmingly severe. Some Mesopotamian omen collections classify events with astonishing seriousness. A mark on a liver, the direction of a bird, or an unusual birth could be interpreted as a message. The universe, apparently, was full of paperwork and passive-aggressive warnings. You smile at the thought, then the smile thins, because omens belong to the same logic. The world is legible, but not equally legible to all. Signs exist everywhere, yet trained interpreters are needed. The gods speak, but through codes. Meaning is present, but mediated. The ordinary person lives surrounded by messages they cannot fully read. This is a form of forgetting too. Not the loss of all memory, but the separation from direct understanding. You are allowed to know that the gods rule. You are not allowed to know precisely how. You are allowed to perform the ritual. You are not always allowed to hold the inner reason. You are allowed to hear the story. The key remains elsewhere. The scholarly debate around divine councils remains lively. Some researchers view them as reflections of early city governance. Others emphasize their theological role, where gods embody natural forces and social powers. Another careful interpretation sees these councils as narrative tools that explain why human life feels ordered, burdened, and unfair. None of these readings cancels the others. Myth can carry several truths at once. The council scene deepens as you imagine the members taking their places. One governs the sky, one speaks for the storm, one keeps wisdom beneath the waters, one holds grain, fertility, writing, birth, death, or destiny. Their identities vary across texts and centuries, but the function remains. Reality is divided among powers. Humanity receives what passes through them. Not everything, only what is granted. In the quiet beneath this arrangement, a strange tenderness appears. Humans are fragile, but not worthless. They are needed. The gods require their hands. Cities require their bodies. Temples require their songs. The earth requires their labour. To be made for work is not glorious, but it gives humans a place in the machinery of the world. A troubling place. A necessary place. The forbidden tablet seems to tremble at this edge. It does not simply ask why people forgot, it asks who benefited when they did. A society with covered memory can still function. It can build walls, sing hymns, harvest grain, and honour kings. It can endure for centuries, but it may never fully know the terms of its own beginning. The council above the plain has done its work well. The evening grows thicker. On the land below, workers return from canals with mud on their legs. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children chase each other between reed fences. A priest climbs temple steps with oil and bread. A scribe counts measures of barley under fading light. No one looks upward for long. Perhaps they feel the order. Perhaps they accept it. Perhaps acceptance is what remains when memory is covered gently enough. The assembly dissolves into dusk, leaving no thunder behind. Only structure remains, invisible and immense. Fields are divided. Labour is assigned. Cities are chosen. Sacred knowledge is lifted above common reach. Human beings move through their appointed world, carrying enough memory to serve, enough longing to wonder, and not quite enough to remember the whole design. A scent of wet clay rises, and the world narrows to a pair of forming hands. You stand near the edge of a shallow pit where water darkens the earth. The mud is cool beneath the surface, smooth where it has been kneaded, rough where straw and grit still catch the skin. Someone has worked it carefully. Someone has pressed it, folded it, opened it, and pressed it again until it becomes ready for shape. There is no crown here. There is no shining throne. There is only material that remembers the river. The making of humanity begins with humble substance in many Mesopotamian traditions. Clay is not chosen because it is rare. It is chosen because it is everywhere, patient, obedient, and strangely alive when mixed with water. It takes the mark of a thumb. It holds the line of a reed. It becomes brick, tablet, bowl, wall, and body in the imagination of the old storytellers. A mainstream fact supports this quiet image. Ancient Mesopotamian creation myths often describe humans as formed from clay, mixed with divine substance, sometimes blood or breath, depending on the version. Researchers at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have long noted that these stories link human life to both earth and divine intention, making people lowly and sacred at once. That double nature is important. You are dust, and yet not only dust, you are fashioned from below, but touched by something from above. The myth refuses to let humans be simple. It gives them mud on their feet and a spark in the chest. It gives them hunger, skill, fear, and a strange ability to ask why they exist. Naturally, this causes trouble. In the narrative shape suggested by the tablet, humans are not made for leisure. They are made to relieve a burden. The world is already arranged, but it is heavy. Canals need clearing, fields need planting, bricks need drying, offerings need preparing, temples need sweeping. Gods, as it turns out, prefer a well-maintained household, so humanity is made useful. Useful hands are the first miracle. You look at those hands in the half-light. They are not yet royal hands, not yet writing hands, not yet hands raised in prayer or clenched in anger. They are hands meant to lift baskets, shape bricks, cut reeds, grind grain, and pull mud from canals. The fingers are clever because labour requires intelligence. The palms are soft at first because suffering has not yet taught them texture. Soon enough, it will. The tablet's fragment seems to describe the earliest humans as bearers of the basket. This phrase appears in Mesopotamian mythic language as a sign of work, especially the heavy carrying of earth for canals and construction. It is not glamorous, but it is vivid. You can feel the strap biting the forehead, the woven reeds pressing the shoulder, the slow ache travelling down the spine. The first human calling is weight. There is a strange honesty in this. Many later cultures imagine humanity beginning in gardens, golden ages, or divine companionship. Mesopotamian tradition often begins with work. It knows the body as a tool before it knows the body as a dreamer. It sees civilization from the viewpoint of mud, grain, sweat, and ration bowls. That may be why it feels so old. You hear the canal workers before you see them. Their steps slap softly through mud. Their baskets creak. One mutters under his breath. Another coughs. A third pauses too long, and someone with authority notices, because authority has excellent eyesight when other people are resting. Some things never change. The quirky tidbit belongs to daily life rather than myth. Ration tablets from ancient Mesopotamia record beer distributed to workers, including labourers involved in large public projects. Beer was thick, nourishing, and safer than uncertain water in many contexts. So the builders of early civilization were not only moving mud, they were also, quite practically, fueled by grain in liquid form. A sleepy toast to bureaucracy, then, but the tablet's concern is not wages. It is purpose. It asks what sort of being is created when usefulness comes first. A tool can be clever. A servant can sing. A worker can dream. Yet if the structure that creates him needs his labour above all, then his memory must be shaped to match that role. Too much memory might interrupt the work. Imagine a newly made human who remembers the council, the making, the terms, and the first command. Imagine that human standing in a canal with mud to his knees, looking upward and saying, rather reasonably, "Excuse me, I would like to renegotiate." You can understand why the higher powers might prefer a gentler arrangement. Forgetting becomes efficient, not total forgetting. That would ruin the design. Humans must remember seasons, tools, songs, warnings, and names. They must learn from elders. They must copy skills. They must build what outlives them. The covered memory concerns something else. The origin clause buried in the contract of existence. No one likes reading the contract, especially when it is cosmic. The open scholarly debate sits exactly here. Some historians interpret human creation for labour as a mythic explanation of why temple service and agricultural work were central to society. Others suggest it reflects tensions between elite institutions and working populations in early cities. A further interpretation, more psychological, sees these myths as ancient reflections on the burden of consciousness itself, where humans know enough to suffer, but not enough to understand the whole order. That last thought lingers. To know enough to suffer is deeply human. A donkey suffers, certainly, and loudly. But a human suffers and asks what suffering means. A human lifts the basket and wonders who made the basket, who assigned the task, and whether any justice sits above the canal bank. The gods may have wanted workers, but they received interpreters. That is the risk of making hands too clever. The tablet's damaged line about filling the mouth with measured words may point toward a language. Humans are given speech, but perhaps bounded speech. They can name tools, count rations, praise gods, and call children home at evening. Yet the first language, the language of direct origin, may be withheld. Their tongues move freely inside a fenced garden of permitted meaning. You feel how soft that fence can be. No iron bars, no visible chains, only ordinary life. Hunger in the morning, work at noon, sleep after dark, birth, illness, marriage, debt, laughter, quarrels, ritual, and the steady wearing down of days. A person can live an entire life inside useful knowledge and never notice the deeper absence. Perhaps that is the most effective veil. You watch the first workers entering the fields of the myth. They do not know they are symbols. They are too tired for symbolism. One carries a basket of earth. One presses seed into watered soil. One kneads clay for bricks. One lifts a child. One places bread before a shrine. They are fulfilling the purpose assigned to them, and also exceeding it in every small human gesture. That exceeding matters. A servant who loves is more than a servant. A worker who sings is more than a tool. A body made for labour becomes a keeper of grief, humour, memory, and tenderness. Perhaps the gods did not intend all of that. Perhaps they did, and the tablet only lets us see one cold edge of a larger design. The clay figure dries in the ancient sun. Its skin hardens, its eyes open. It receives breath, command, hunger, and hands. Around it, the world waits with fields unfinished and temples unfed. Somewhere above, the council expects order. Somewhere below, the mud remembers every footprint. The human stands between them, made from earth, needed by heaven, not yet aware of how much has already been hidden. Your mind drifts into the first hush that follows creation, when the new beings begin to learn. At first, their knowledge is simple and useful. They learn the weight of a basket, the pull of wet mud around the ankles, the smell of barley when it ripens in the heat. They learn which reeds bend cleanly, which clay cracks, which canal bank gives way under careless feet. They learn the patience of seed and the impatience of hunger. Then they learn one another. That may be where the trouble starts. A human being is not a single tool. A human being looks sideways. One worker sees another struggle and remembers the gesture. A child watches a mother shape bread and copies the motion. A young apprentice hears a priest recite a hymn and catches a phrase not meant for him. Knowledge slips from hand to hand with the shameless ease of smoke. It is difficult to contain. The tablet's quiet tension seems to gather around this moment. The created ones begin as useful hands, but they do not remain only hands. Their eyes follow patterns. Their ears collect repetitions. Their mouths test words. Their minds begin joining things together. River to season, offering to favour, omen to fear, ruler to command. Awareness has roots. A mainstream fact gives this idea its earthly anchor. Archaeologists studying early Mesopotamia have shown that urban life required sophisticated coordination, including irrigation management, craft production, long-distance trade, and written administration. Researchers at Stanford, Yale, and the University of Chicago often describe early cities as engines of social complexity, where knowledge had to circulate for the system to survive. That is the problem. Of course, a city needs intelligent workers. A hierarchy fears intelligent workers. There is the little crack in the design. You stand near a canal at dawn, watching human awareness sharpen inside daily labour. A man measures the water level with a marked reed. He notices that the flood was lower than his father described. A woman at a loom counts patterns in dyed thread, making order from repetition. A brewer watches foam rise and learns the hidden moods of grain. A child traces marks in dust, pretending to write. No God needs to appear. The danger is already here. It lies in comparison, memory, and pattern. When humans compare, they judge. When they remember, they question. When they see pattern, they imagine causes. From that moment, obedience is never quite innocent again. Work can continue. Offerings can rise. Kings can command. But a second life opens inside the mind. The hidden life asks why. You hear it in the ordinary city. Why does one family eat well while another counts crumbs? Why does the temple store grain while labourers sweat? Why does a king say the gods chose him? Why do the stars keep their places while human lives scatter like chaff? Soft questions, dangerous questions. The ancient myths do not always fear human intelligence directly. Sometimes they celebrate craft, wisdom, music, writing, and skilled speech. The god of wisdom can be generous. The goddess of writing can be revered. The arts of civilization are divine gifts. Yet gifts can become dangerous when receivers begin to examine the giver. That is an old anxiety. The tablet's phrase about humans holding the bright inside may belong to this anxiety. Some translators might read it as skill, insight, or sacred capacity. The word is damaged. An honest reading must stay cautious. Still, the image is powerful. Something bright has appeared within the clay-made beings. Not full divinity, not equality with the gods. Something smaller, but persistent. A coal under ash. The quirky tidbit comes from the world of ancient craft. Mesopotamian glassmakers, metalworkers, and perfumers possessed specialized techniques that could seem almost magical to outsiders. Later texts sometimes preserve recipes in coded or difficult language. Imagine discovering that the glamorous secret of divine-looking cosmetics involved minerals, oils, soot, and someone grinding ingredients for hours while pretending this was noble work. Civilization sparkles because someone is tired. In such a world, knowledge is never neutral. A recipe can be wealth, a ritual can be authority, a calendar can decide planting and taxes, a list of omens can guide kings, a writing system can make memory portable, but it can also make power more durable. The clay tablet is both lamp and lock. You feel the double nature of writing. A written sign preserves what speech might lose, yet only trained people can read it. The more a society depends on written memory, the more power gathers around those who control the signs. So when humans begin to remember through clay, they also enter a new form of forgetting. Most people live beside tablets they cannot understand. That is almost cruel. A word can sit in plain view and remain sealed. The scholarly debate here turns on whether ancient myths about restricted knowledge reflect priestly secrecy, social hierarchy, or broad human unease about civilization itself. Some researchers at Oxford have emphasized the role of scrubble elites in shaping sacred tradition. Other historians see myth as a way of explaining why knowledge appears unevenly distributed. Another school suggests that the stories reveal a deeper ambivalence toward technology, the feeling that every gift also asks a price. You can sense that price. The first humans become better at their tasks. They dig straighter canals. They store more grain. They build higher platforms. They divide labour. They make tools. They teach children. They notice the sky. They count the moon. They bury their dead with care and wonder whether the dead still hear. Useful hands have become remembering minds. This is not rebellion yet. It is more delicate than rebellion. It is growth. But growth changes the balance. A being made to carry baskets may begin to carry stories. A being made to feed temples may begin to interpret dreams. A being made to serve gods may begin to imitate them by naming, building, measuring, and judging. Creation has escaped its simplest purpose. You imagine the overseers watching. At first, perhaps they are pleased. The work improves. The offerings are regular. The city grows. Smoke rises from 100 ovens. Storehouses fill. Temples gleam with plaster. Songs become more elaborate. The divine household runs smoothly, and everyone appreciates smooth operations, even in heaven. Then the songs change. They become questions disguised as praise. A hymn may praise a god for giving wisdom, but in praising the gift, it reveals the human who now possesses it. A lament may ask why a city fell, and in asking why, it assumes moral order can be challenged. A proverb may laugh at the powerful, quietly, carefully, with the ancient version of a raised eyebrow. Humour is a form of intelligence. Perhaps that annoyed them most. The tablet's hidden drama is not that humans become wicked. It is that humans become aware enough to become unpredictable. They can obey from devotion, fear, hunger, habit, or strategy. They can serve and resent service. They can remember old songs and place new meanings inside them. They can sleep beneath a temple wall and dream of the sky. This is the dangerous gift. Not strength, not immortality. Interpretation. Once humans interpret the world is no longer merely endured. It is questioned, narrated, judged, and sometimes quietly refused. The council's arrangement begins to tremble, not because humans storm the heavens, but because they begin to notice the architecture of their own condition. A soft wind crosses the fields. The barley bends in ripples of pale gold. Workers pause, just for a breath, and look toward the temple platform rising against morning light. No one says the forbidden thought aloud. The day has work enough. The baskets wait. The canals need clearing. The gods require offerings. Still, inside the clay-made beings, something bright continues to gather. Perhaps awareness was the gift. Perhaps forgetting was the answer. The night deepens, and the first act of forgetting arrives without thunder. It does not descend like a weapon. It does not split the sky or burn the fields. It moves more quietly than that, like mist entering a room through cracks no one has noticed. A person wakes and knows how to grind grain. He knows his brother's face. He knows the path to the canal. Yet something behind those memories has softened. The shape remains. The meaning withdraws. You stand in the first morning after the dimming, though no one calls it that. The city wakes as it always does. Smoke rises. Dogs nose through refuse. Children complain about work with the ancient honesty of children everywhere. A woman shakes dust from a woven mat. A man lifts a basket and feels the old ache settle across his shoulders. Nothing looks broken. That is what makes it disturbing. A catastrophe announces itself. A famine hollows faces. A flood leaves mud on rooftops. A conquest leaves ruins, ashes, and stories sharp enough to cut the tongue. But this forgetting leaves daily life intact. It removes not the tools of survival, but the hidden explanation. It dims the memory of terms, origins, and first arrangements. People continue. That continuation may be the whole point. In Mesopotamian literature, memory often belongs to ritual, kingship, and the preservation of names. Records confirm that ancient scribes worked carefully to transmit lists, hymns, legal formulas, and royal inscriptions across generations. Scholars at Harvard, Yale, and the University of Chicago have emphasized that written tradition in Mesopotamia was a deliberate culture of remembrance, not a casual habit. So when a text imagines forgetting, it matters. Forgetting is not merely absence. It is the opposite of one of civilization's sacred labors. To write a name is to hold it against decay. To recite a hymn is to keep a god present in speech. To copy an old list is to stitch the living moment onto a longer fabric. Memory is work, and work is holy when it resists disappearance. Yet the tablet hints at another kind of work, the work of covering. The first act of forgetting may not erase names from clay. It may change what names do inside the mind. A person can still speak the name of a god, but no longer feel the full force of what that name once opened. A worker can still tell a creation story, but hear it as distant ritual rather than personal memory. A city can still celebrate its founding, while the first cause retreats into sacred fog. You can say the words. You cannot enter them. This is a subtle lock the mouth remembers. The heart does not fully awaken. The hands perform the offerings. The inner door remains closed. In such a world, religion continues, but becomes more formal. Myth continues, but becomes more remote. Labour continues, but becomes less connected to the question of why labour was assigned. The veil does not silence culture. It organises it. You see this in the temple courtyard, where dawn spreads pale light across brick and plaster. Priests move with deliberate steps. Oil is poured, bread is placed. Incense rises in thin lines that smell of resin and smoke. The ritual is beautiful, almost tender. Yet beauty can also soothe the question it cannot answer. A worshipper bows. He feels awe. He does not remember standing nearer. Perhaps no one ever stood nearer in a literal sense. Perhaps this is what myth does, giving form to the sensation that something important has always been missing. Ancient people knew the feeling as well as you do, the sense that life is meaningful, yet not fully explained. The feeling that rituals point somewhere real, but the door they indicate has been sealed. The scholarly debate opens gently here. Some historians interpret mythic forgetting as a way to explain human mortality, limited wisdom, and distance from the gods. Others view it through social history, seeing restricted memory as a reflection of institutions that kept sacred knowledge among scribes and priests. A few comparative scholars suggest that stories of lost knowledge preserve psychological truths about civilization's cost. Each reading leaves a footprint. None closes the path. A quirky tidbit hides in the scribal schools. Some students copied long lexical lists, grouping signs, words, professions, animals, plants, stones, and objects. These lists could be exhausting, but they trained memory with almost athletic discipline. Imagine a sleepy student memorizing lists of wooden objects while wondering whether the gods truly needed this many words for furniture. The ancient classroom had its own quiet suffering. Those lists matter because they show a culture trying to order the world through memory. To name things was to arrange them. To arrange them was to understand them. Yet the forbidden tablet suggests that the deepest category may have been missing from the lists. Humans could classify birds, tools, officials, cities, and stars, while still failing to classify themselves. What is a human? Worker, servant, singer, builder. Rememberer with a covered core, the act of forgetting might have unfolded through language itself. The first words for origin may have become sacred, then restricted, then symbolic, then obscure. A phrase once understood by everyone becomes priestly speech. A priestly phrase becomes an old formula. An old formula becomes a copied line. A copied line becomes a damaged fragment. At the end, a scholar leans over clay. At the beginning, a human forgets. The distance between those two moments is almost too large to hold, but the tablet holds it badly and beautifully. Its broken signs are not clean windows. They are more like cracks in a wall. You do not see the whole chamber. You see enough darkness to know the chamber is there. The first act of forgetting may have required no violence because ordinary time assisted it. One generation receives a story with trembling. The next receives it with respect. The next recites it as tradition. The next copies it because the teacher says so. The next preserves the signs and loses the shock. That is how fire becomes ash. The tablet's line about placing sleep upon the inward knowing now feels less like a single command and more like a process. Sleep can be placed gradually. It can be repeated. It can be maintained through custom, hierarchy, fear, and comfort. Humans may even protect the veil once it shelters them from difficult knowledge. There is mercy in forgetting. That thought arrives softly, and it should not be dismissed. To remember everything might be unbearable. If humans truly remembered their origins, their assigned purpose, their distance from divine powers, and every lost possibility, ordinary life might become impossible. No one would finish irrigation work while contemplating cosmic injustice all morning. The canals would suffer. So would dinner. Perhaps the dimming allowed life to continue. It narrowed the wound. It gave humans fields instead of abysses, children instead of endless metaphysics, bread instead of permanent dread. The price was a deep unease, a feeling passed through dreams, stories, temples, and the eyes of anyone who has ever looked at the stars too long. You stand among the waking people. They do not know what has happened. A woman remembers a song, but one line feels strange in her mouth. A child dreams of a door and forgets it by breakfast. A worker pauses beside the canal, suddenly sad for no reason he can name. The priest completes the ritual correctly, though his hand trembles when he speaks an older title. The city continues breathing. That is the triumph and the sorrow of the first forgetting. Nothing ends. Everything narrows. Humans keep their hands, their voices, their hunger, their humour, their tenderness, and their stubborn little questions. They lose only the full memory of why those questions hurt. The mist thins as morning brightens. Life resumes its measured rhythm, and somewhere beneath the ordinary sounds of grinding stone, creaking baskets, temple chant, and river birds, a covered knowing settles deeper into the human heart. The city rises higher, and silence is packed carefully into every brick. You stand where builders gather before sunrise, their bodies still half softened by sleep. The air smells of damp earth, reed rope, animal hide, and smoke drifting from breakfast fires. Clay is mixed in shallow pits, thickened with straw, pressed into moulds, and turned beneath the sun. Each brick looks ordinary. Together, they become walls, houses, storehouses, courtyards, and temples. Civilization grows by repetition. One brick, then another, then another. The forgotten thing does not vanish as the city expands. It sinks. It moves downward, under streets, under thresholds, under floors swept clean by women who have no time for cosmic mystery. It lies beneath packed earth where children play with broken potsherds. It rests under courtyards where families eat bread, argue softly, and pour beer into cups of baked clay. Daily life covers everything. That is not a failure of memory, exactly. It is how survival works. A person cannot spend every hour contemplating hidden origins. Someone must repair the oven. Someone must fetch water. Someone must scold the goat before it eats something important. The ordinary world is not shallow. It is demanding, warm, noisy, and full of small emergencies. Yet beneath it the silence remains. A mainstream fact gives the scene its foundation. Archaeology has shown that early Mesopotamian cities were often built in layers, as generations rebuilt houses, raised floors, repaired walls, and constructed new buildings above older remains. Excavations at sites such as Uruk, Nippur, and Eridu reveal deep sequences of occupation, where entire periods of life rest physically beneath later settlement. The past becomes ground. You walk through a narrow lane in the growing city. The walls lean close enough to hold the heat. A doorway opens, and you glimpse a woman grinding grain with steady shoulders. Another courtyard holds jars sealed with clay stoppers. A child scratches marks in dust with a reed and quickly smears them away when someone calls. A dog sleeps in the only useful patch of shade. Above the roofs, the temple platform rises. Its presence organizes the view. The city has learned how to hide old memory by making new memory everywhere. Festivals fill the year. Work crews fill the canals. Markets fill the streets. Births, marriages, debts, offerings, funerals, quarrels, and songs fill the human mind until older questions drift backward, not gone, but crowded out. The covered knowing becomes one layer among many. Cities are magnificent distractions. They give people meaning close at hand, a wall to repair, a household to protect, a god to honour, a ruler to fear, a debt to remember with increasing regret. All these things anchor life. They are real. They matter. Yet they also keep the gaze horizontal, moving from door to field to temple to ration bowl. The eye looks outward. The hidden thing waits inward. The tablet's mystery becomes architectural here. Forgetting is not only a mental veil, it is also an urban process. Build enough institutions, routines, rituals, and obligations, and a society can preserve fragments of an older truth while making them increasingly difficult to feel. The city becomes a machine that remembers and forgets at the same time. That is its strange genius. In temple archives, scribes record offerings. In households, elders repeat family stories. At shrines, priests chant inherited hymns. In workshops, apprentices learn craft secrets by watching hands rather than reading tablets. Memory is everywhere, yet no single memory is whole. The old origin is scattered across ritual, myth, labour, place names, and phrases nobody fully explains. You hear the streets breathing. A vendor calls out dates. A pot cracks in a kiln. Someone laughs too loudly. Somewhere, a priest sings in a room smelling of oil, wool, and old smoke. His words rise beautifully, but the people outside hear only a portion. The temple wall does not forbid them from listening. It simply stands there, thick and patient, doing what walls have always done. They divide space without speaking. A quirky fringe tidbit clings to certain ancient ruins. Later traditions sometimes imagine buried cities as places where giants, spirits, or pre-human beings once lived. Professional archaeologists do not treat such legends as excavation reports, thankfully. Still, those stories show how deeply people sense that something older lies beneath them. Ruins invite the imagination to kneel and listen. The ground makes people suspicious. And in Mesopotamia, the ground had every reason to seem full of secrets. Dig a foundation, and older bricks appear, clear a canal, and fragments of pottery rise in the mud. Reuse a mound, and you live on the compressed lives of the dead. The landscape teaches that the present is thin. It teaches that memory has weight, and that forgotten things do not necessarily leave. They become support. That is a beautiful and uncomfortable thought. The houses of the living stand on the abandoned floors of others. The temple of one generation rises above the shrine of another. A city may praise continuity while quietly swallowing what came before. Each rebuilding honours the place and erases it. The scholarly debate around early urbanization remains rich and unsettled. Some researchers emphasize environmental pressures, especially irrigation and resource control. Others point to temple economies, trade networks, and social competition among elites. Another line of interpretation asks how ordinary families experience these transformations. Because cities were not only plans imposed from above, they were also habits built from below. This matters for the forgotten tablet. If forgetting comes only from divine decree, humans are passive. If forgetting also comes through city life, humans participate without knowing. They build the walls that narrow their own view. They preserve the songs that hide the older meanings. They pass down rituals that comfort them while softening the shock of origin. They are not foolish. They are busy. You step into a house at twilight. The floor is swept. A lamp burns near the wall, feeding on oil with a small steady flame. The family meal is simple, warm, and fragrant. Bread breaks. Beer is poured. A child asks where people came from. An elder answers with a story that has been told many times. The story is true enough for the room. It gives shape. It gives belonging. It gives the child a place beneath the gods and among the ancestors. Yet something in the telling has become gentle. The sharp edge is gone. The first purpose, the burden, the covered knowing, the council's decision, all of it is softened into moral instruction. That's how homes domesticate terror. You cannot blame them. No child should fall asleep beneath the full weight of cosmic administration. Better a story with clay, breath, gods, and fields. Better a world where work is hard but meaningful, where offerings matter, where the dead are remembered, where the city stands because everyone does their part. The hidden truth can wait beneath the floor. And it does. Outside, the night city glows with small lamps. From a distance, the settlement looks peaceful, almost tender. Its walls hold warmth, its temple catches moonlight, its canals reflect stars in broken strips. Yet beneath the streets, older levels sleep under the pressure of newer lives. Beneath the songs, older meanings fold inward. Beneath the names, older names lie covered. The silence is not empty. It is built. Every brick pressed by human hands becomes part of the covering. Every street laid over older ground becomes another sentence in the long language of forgetting. This city does not destroy the hidden memory. It gives it a place to sleep, and then builds beautifully over it. You stand still as the last workers leave the brick fields. Their footprints harden in mud. The stars open above the plain, ancient and unreachable. Below them, the city settles into darkness, proud of its walls, faithful to its gods, filled with people who know many things and have forgotten the one thing the tablet keeps trying to remember. A reed stylus taps softly, and shadows gather around the hands of the scribes. The room is narrow, warm, and thick with concentration. Clay tablets rest on low benches. Some are fresh and dark. Some have dried to a pale brown. Some are cracked at the corner, where a careless thumb pressed too hard. A teacher moves between students with the expression of a man who has seen civilization endangered by bad handwriting. You feel the patience in the air. It smells of clay, sweat, reed, and dust. Outside, The city rattles with carts and animals, but inside the school, the world has been reduced to signs. A wedge leans one way, a line presses deeper, a small angle changes the word entirely. The students learn that memory is not only what the mind keeps, it is what the hand can repeat without panic. The forbidden echo survives here, not as a guarded secret in a locked chamber. Perhaps it survives in copied lines, practice tablets, hymns, old lists, and fragments of stories that teachers pass along because teachers are powerful creatures of habit. They preserve things through repetition. Sometimes they preserve wisdom. Sometimes they preserve confusion. Often, they preserve both with impressive confidence. The mainstream fact is wonderfully solid. Mesopotamian scribal schools trained students through copying, memorization, lexical lists, model tablets, proverbs, hymns, and literary compositions. Scholars at the University of Pennsylvania, Oxford, and Chicago have shown that these school texts preserved much of Sumerian literature long after Sumerian had ceased to be spoken as an everyday language. This is extraordinary. A dead language continued breathing in classrooms. You watch a young student bend over his tablet, his shoulders are tight, his stylus is cut from reed. He copies a line about ancient beings, divine decrees, and human limits. Does he believe it? Does he understand it? Does he secretly wish the gods had chosen shorter assignments? The answer is lost, though the clay remembers his uneven pressure. A teacher's model sits nearby. The signs are cleaner, more disciplined, almost beautiful. The student copy is clumsier, but it still carries the old words forward. This is how shadows travel, not always through prophets or kings, sometimes through a tired boy with clay under his fingernails, copying a phrase he cannot fully enter. The tablet's forbidden quality becomes stranger in this light. A truly dangerous text might be hidden, yet a text can also become hidden by becoming educational. Place it among exercises, and it becomes less threatening. Require students to copy it, and its mystery becomes routine. A line once whispered in ritual may become homework. That is almost funny. It is also unsettling. When a sacred phrase becomes a school assignment, it does not die. It changes temperature. It cools. The student learns to reproduce the signs before he learns to tremble at their meaning. The hand becomes obedient before the soul becomes awake. The old story passes through him like water through a reed basket, leaving only traces. Yet traces can be enough. The scribal world loved lists, lists of signs, lists of professions, lists of birds, fish, trees, stones, vessels, cities, gods, an object so specific that modern readers sometimes feel ancient education was designed by someone with a personal grudge against free time. The lists trained memory by ordering reality. To copy them was to build a small palace inside the mind. But the palace had locked rooms. Some texts were copied by advanced students. Some belonged to temple or palace circles. Some ritual knowledge was restricted by training rather than by dramatic prohibition. You did not need a curse on the doorway when years of education already kept most people outside. That is the quiet efficiency of literacy in an ancient world. A word can be public. Reading it can still be rare. The quirky tidbit here is almost tender. Some school tablets preserve little jokes, insults, and complaints about student life. There are texts where a student gets scolded, beaten, fed, praised, corrected, and sent back to work. Ancient education apparently combined lofty literature with the timeless experience of being told you're not trying hard enough. The past feels close. A boy rubs his wrist, a teacher sighs, a lesson continues. On the tablet, the signs speak of a world arranged by powers older than cities. In the courtyard, someone drops a jar. Everyone briefly looks up because even sacred education cannot resist a loud accident. Then the copying resumes. This rhythm matters. The scribes are not merely recording information. They are deciding which fragments survive. Their choices shape the memory of civilization. A myth copied in 10 schools may endure. A family tale told only at one hearth may vanish. A royal inscription carved in stone may boast for centuries. A worker's private grief may leave no mark at all. History is unevenly lit. The forbidden tablet may have survived because it belonged to this scribal current. Its language could have been old even when copied. Its imagery may have been puzzling, but worthy of preservation because it touched the origins of work, gods, and human awareness. The scribes copied shadows, and the shadows outlived the hands. A scholarly debate continues around scribal transmission. Some specialists argue that schools were conservative institutions, preserving older texts with reverence. Others emphasize creativity, noting that scribes adapted, standardized, rearranged, and reinterpreted what they copied. Another view sees scribes as cultural gatekeepers, shaping what later generations could remember about the deep past. The debate is gentle but important. A copied text is never only copied. It is handled, framed, selected, and placed among other texts. Its meaning changes with its neighbours. A phrase about human forgetting reads differently beside a creation myth than beside a school exercise. It reads differently in a temple archive than in a modern museum. Context is a kind of weather. You sense that weather shifting round the tablet. A line that once belonged to ritual may become literature. A line that once explained work may become theology. A line that once warned initiates may become a mysterious exercise for students. Through every transformation, the hidden idea remains half awake, like an ember under ash. The scribes themselves live between worlds. They serve institutions, but they also preserve memory beyond any one king. Kings die, temples fall, cities burn, scribes copy. They are servants of power, certainly, but also servants of something older and more stubborn than power. The written sign has its own quiet ambition. It wants to endure in the schoolroom. Evening approaches. Light slants through the doorway. The students are tired now. Their signs grow less careful. The teacher notices. Naturally, because teachers have always noticed when the mind begins escaping through the window. He corrects a tablet. He rewrites a line. He taps the clay where the old phrase must be copied again. The student presses the reed. The sign appears. The shadow moves forward. This is how the forbidden echo passes through time. Not whole, not clear, not even necessarily understood. It travels in classrooms, archives, temple rooms, and storage jars. It hides among lists and hymns. It sleeps inside damaged tablets, waiting for the accident of discovery and the patience of readers who know that clay rarely gives up its secrets all at once. You step back from the schoolroom. The city noise returns softly. Somewhere, bread bakes. Somewhere, a canal gate closes. Somewhere, a student carries his practice tablet home, annoyed by grammar and unaware that his awkward wedges may one day become a thread in the oldest question of humankind. The scribes copy shadows because shadows are what remain when light has moved on. And in those shadows, the covered memory keeps its shape. Rain begins in the distance, and the river loses its patience with the world. At first, it is only a sound beyond the reed beds, a soft patter on dry roofs, a darker line beneath the horizon. The smell changes before the sky does, carrying wet soil, loosened dust, and the green breath of marsh plants. People look up from their work, measuring the clouds with that ancient expression shared by farmers everywhere. Concern, calculation, and mild insult. The rivers of Mesopotamia are generous, but not gentle. They bring silt, water, fish, reeds, transport, and life. They also bring sudden ruin when the balance shifts. A canal can overflow, a field can drown, a house wall can soften and slump like a tired animal. The same water that feeds the city can unmake it. So when rain gathers, memory sharpens. You stand on a low bank as the current thickens. Branches move past. Reed mats tear loose. A clay jar bumps against something unseen and disappears. Children are called indoors. Animals are driven toward higher ground. Men hurry to reinforce banks with baskets of earth, speaking little, because fear does not always need dramatic speeches. The sky lowers. The Great Flood tradition in Mesopotamia belongs to this landscape of blessing and threat. Mainstream scholarship recognizes flood narratives in Sumerian and Akkadian literature, including stories connected with Ziusudra, Atrahasis, and Utnapishtim. Researchers at Harvard, Yale, and the British Museum have studied these texts as powerful mythic responses to riverine life, disaster memory, kingship, and divine order. The flood is never only water, it is interruption, it is judgment, it is a line drawn through time. The old narratives often place a flood between an earlier world and a later one. Before the flood, the atmosphere is larger, stranger, closer to divine arrangements. After the flood, human history resumes with altered limits. Kingship returns, cities rebuild, offerings rise again. But something has changed, and the change is carried in the silence between surviving lines. The tablet's mystery deepens in that water. If humans had already forgotten their first condition, the flood becomes a second covering. It buries not only houses and fields, but evidence, names, tools, and the fragile threads of old memory. It turns stories into fragments. It allows later generations to say, there was a world before, but the waters took it. That phrase is both explanation and veil. You watch the flood enter the city. It does not rush like a monster in a painted scene. It swells, it seeps, it finds low places first. It darkens streets. It lifts straw, dung, sandals, broken reeds, and small domestic tragedies. A woman carries a basket of bread above her head. A man drags a goat by a rope, and the goat, committed to making every crisis harder, resists with admirable conviction. Even disaster has its comedy. Then the water rises higher. Clay walls begin to melt at their base. Storage jars topple. Grain turns sour. A family altar is lifted from the corner and carried upward, wrapped in cloth. Someone calls a name again and again. The sound is lost under rain. In the temple district, priests move sacred objects away from damp floors, because even divine property requires practical care. Water touches everything. The flood changes memory because it destroys context. A tablet found in place tells one story. A tablet washed away tells another, or none at all. A building layer sealed by flood silt can preserve a moment, but it can also separate what came before from what came next. Archaeologists understand this tension well. Destruction can be archive and erasure together. Mud remembers strangely. It buries and protects. It smothers and saves. A quirky tidbit rises from the archaeology of flood layers. Early excavators sometimes became excited when they found thick deposits of clean silt, hoping they had discovered evidence for a single famous flood. Later research showed that Mesopotamia experienced many local and regional floods. The land did not need one neat disaster. It had a whole talent for watery inconvenience. The myths gathered that talent into meaning. They turned repeated danger into a cosmic event. In the flood stories, the gods often decide that humanity has become too numerous, too noisy, or too troublesome. The language of human noise is important. It echoes the anxiety that people, once created, do not remain quiet tools. They multiply, gather, speak, build, and disturb the peace of those above. The flood becomes a divine solution, terrible in scale, followed by regret, adjustment, and renewed order. This is administration by catastrophe. Not ideal, frankly, but myth is not always flattering to divine management. It allows the gods to argue, misjudge, suffer hunger when offerings cease, and learn from the consequences of their own decisions. That complexity makes the stories feel older than simple moral lessons. They are not clean. They're muddy, like the rivers themselves. The scholarly debate around these flood traditions is still alive. Some researchers see them as memories of real ancient floods magnified into sacred history. Others emphasize literary borrowing, theological reflection, and political symbolism. Another careful interpretation reads the flood as a myth of cultural reset, a way to explain why the earliest age became unreachable. That last reading touches the hidden wound. A reset can preserve structure while deleting memory. After the waterfalls, people rebuild. They remember the disaster, but not everything lost within it. They name the flood as the reason the past is broken. They accept that the former world cannot be fully recovered. The flood becomes a curtain, wet and heavy, hanging across the beginning. You stand on the higher ground as rain weakens. Below, the plain has become a dull mirror. Roofs protrude like small islands. Reeds lie flattened. Dead branches collect against walls. The city smells of mud, rot, wet wool, and extinguished fires. People move slowly, stunned by survival. Their first task is not philosophy. It is finding food, kin, tools, and dry ground. Memory must wait. This is how catastrophe edits history. It forces the living to choose what can be carried. A child, a seed jar, a god's emblem, a tablet basket, a loaf, a name. Much is left behind, not because it lacks value, but because human arms are finite. The flood teaches selection with cruel efficiency. Perhaps ancient forgetting worked like that. Not all at once, not without grief. The waters recede, leaving silt over streets and courtyards. Workers scrape mud from doorways. A scribe finds tablets fused together in a collapsed room. Some signs are still legible. Some have blurred into silence. He saves what he can, then carries them into daylight, where the sun begins its slow work of hardening loss. A new city will rise. It will stand over flood mud. It will tell children that a great water once came. It will preserve the story in hymns, lists, and warnings. Yet beneath the practical memory of disaster lies another possibility. The flood may have helped humans accept the disappearance of an older knowledge. The water took it. The water ended that age. The water explains why no one remembers clearly. The explanation is comforting. It is also incomplete. The river glimmers under a pale sky. Suddenly innocent. Birds return to the reeds as though nothing unusual has happened. Humans, less fortunate, must rebuild meaning from debris. They lift bricks, dry grain, bury the dead, and search for signs that the gods have not fully abandoned them. And under the new layer of mud, the hidden memory settles deeper. The flood has washed the names, blurred the tools, scattered the tablets, and folded the earliest world into silence. Yet silence is not the same as absence. Somewhere beneath the silt, something still waits, pressed flat by water, time, and the sorrow of those who survived without knowing exactly what had been taken from them. A distant bell seems to tremble in the dark, though no bell is visible on the plain. The sound is only in the mind, a slow metal note where the river mist meets the fields. It calls attention to a boundary, not a wall of brick, not a canal bank, not a gate watched by sleepy guards, but a finer line. On one side, ordinary knowledge. On the other, knowledge that changes the one who receives it. You approach that line carefully. The tablet's fragments begin to gather around figures who stand near such thresholds. They are not quite gods, not quite ordinary humans, not simply priests, and not easily dismissed as decorative myth. They appear like keepers of dangerous memory, placed at the edges of civilization, where wisdom arrives from strange directions and must be measured before it enters human hands. The old traditions remember them in different ways. Sages, watchers, advisors, guardians of the boundary. A mainstream fact gives these figures historical texture. Mesopotamian literature preserves traditions of ancient sages associated with kingship, ritual knowledge, and the foundations of civilization. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied these beings as part of learned scribal culture, especially in lists that connect them with early rulers and wisdom before the flood. 7 often appears. The number is not accidental in the imagination of the ancient Near East. 7 can mark completeness, ritual force, cosmic order, and sacred sequence. 7 gates, 7 sages, 7 days in certain later traditions. 7 signs that the mind is stepping away from ordinary counting and towards symbolic structure. 7 feels finished. You stand at the edge of a reed marsh while evening thickens. The water is black, soft, and full of small movements. Frogs click in the dark. Birds settle among the reeds. A faint smell of fish, mud, and green decay rises from the pools. The city lights burn behind you, but ahead lies the watery margin, where land becomes uncertain. That is where wisdom often appears, not in the middle of the marketplace, where everyone is bargaining over onions with great seriousness, not in the comfort of the household. Wisdom comes from edges, deserts, mountains, deep waters, burial places, and dreams. Humans seem to understand that the most important truths do not usually walk politely through the front door. They arrive damp, or dusty, or unwanted. The quirky tidbit here belongs to later descriptions of culture bringing beings connected with fish imagery. Some ancient and classical accounts describe wise figures rising from the waters, teaching humans arts, writing, and civilized order. Professional historians treat such reports with caution, since they come through complex traditions. Still, the image is unforgettable. Imagine a dripping instructor of civilization, patiently explaining agriculture while everyone tries not to stare. It is strange, yes, but strangeness can preserve meaning. The fish-like sage suggests knowledge from the deep. Water hides what land exposes. The deep is older than the city, older than fields, older than walls. If human memory has been covered, then perhaps the keepers of memory stand where the covering is thinnest, near water, near dreams, near kings at the beginning of Yorda. The tablet system begins to reveal itself. Human beings are limited, but not abandoned. Certain figures carry knowledge across the boundary. They advise rulers, establish rites, teach crafts, and guard the passage between divine design and human practice. They are bridges, but guarded bridges. Not everyone crosses them. Not everyone should. At least according to the world that preserved these stories, a bridge can also be a checkpoint. That is worth noticing. In the mythic structure, the sages do not simply give humanity everything. They transmit selected knowledge, agriculture, writing, ritual, building, law, divination, healing, music, and measurement may be distributed in portions. Knowledge descends in managed streams, not as a flood. The boundary keepers ensure that civilization grows without fully remembering its origin. This is control through generosity. A city receives gifts and feels blessed. People learn useful arts and feel grateful. Kings gain counsel and feel chosen. Temples gain ritual systems and feel connected to the gods. Yet the deepest question remains guarded. Why was humanity made to need these gifts in the first place? Why does wisdom arrive through intermediaries rather than from human memory itself? The marsh gives no answer. It only breathes. You imagine 7 figures standing where the water touches land. Not necessarily in one place, and not necessarily as literal bodies. Perhaps each represents a category of knowledge. One holds writing, one holds building, one holds ritual purification, one holds healing, one holds music and lament, one holds omens, one holds the hidden rules by which kingship speaks to heaven. Together they form a system. The tablet's reference to keepers at the turning may belong to such a system. The phrase is broken, and the word for turning may mean boundary, transition, gate, or appointed change. It is exactly the sort of damaged phrase that makes scholars reach for coffee and patience. A careful translator will not force it, but the image remains suggestive. Something is being guarded where one age turns into another. The scholarly debate around these sages is open and layered. Some researchers interpret them as mythologized ancestors of scholarly professions. Others see them as figures used by later scribes to claim ancient authority for their own learning. Another interpretation views them as guardians of ritual purity. defining who may handle knowledge with danger attached. Danger attached to knowledge. That phrase belongs to many ancient cultures. Knowledge is not always imagined as a harmless light. It can burn. It can confuse. It can place obligations on the one who receives it. It can separate a person from ordinary society. The keeper at the boundary is there not only to prevent theft, but also to prevent injury, perhaps forgetting protected humans. Perhaps it can find them. The two possibilities sit side by side like sleeping animals. In the city, the scribble elite may have seen themselves as heirs to such keepers. They copied old traditions, interpreted omens, served kings, and protected technical knowledge. Their world was not democratic in the modern sense. Knowledge moved through training, status, temple access, and institutional approval. A secret did not need to be shouted about to remain inaccessible. You feel the boundaries shift from myth to society. The seven keepers become not merely supernatural figures, but images of controlled transmission. They explain why people have arts, but not total understanding. They explain why rulers need scholars. They explain why rituals must be performed correctly by those who know the inherited forms. They explain why human memory is restored in pieces, never all at once. Pieces are safer, or easier to manage. The sky darkens further, and stars begin appearing in careful order. Ancient observers studied the heavens with extraordinary devotion. They watched patterns, recorded omens, and linked celestial events with earthly affairs. Their attention was not primitive confusion. It was disciplined observation within a sacred worldview, where sky and earth mirrored one another. The boundary above echoes the boundary below. Stars are visible to everyone, but their meaning belongs to interpreters. Water flows past everyone, but deep wisdom emerges through chosen figures. Words can be heard by everyone, but secret names remain restricted. The world is open and closed at the same time. That is the old design. You stand between marsh and city, feeling how the seven keepers might have served the memory system. They did not erase the past. They curated it. They allowed humanity to remember tools, rites, and royal patterns while leaving the first memory veiled. They kept civilization from collapsing into ignorance, but also from awakening too quickly. A careful mercy, a careful prison. The reeds move in the night wind. Something breaks the water surface, then disappears. Behind you, the city glows with lamps. Ahead, the marsh lies dark and patient, holding reflections of stars in broken pieces. You understand, not with certainty, but with the slow pressure of a dream. That human memory may have been divided among guardians. No one person holds the whole. No one city remembers everything. The keepers stand at the boundary, neither fully revealing nor fully hiding. They offer enough knowledge for civilization to endure, enough mystery for temples to remain necessary, and enough silence for the oldest question to continue breathing beneath the clay. The sound of counting begins softly, like pebbles falling into a bowl. You hear one number, then another, until the air itself seems measured. Grain is counted, sheep are counted, days are counted, workers are counted, offerings are counted. The ancient city may look like dust and prayer from far away, but up close it is wonderfully obsessed with numbers. Nothing sacred escapes accounting for long. You stand inside a storehouse where the light is dim and golden. Jars line the walls. Baskets of barley sit beneath woven covers. Tokens, seals, and tablets rest near the entrance, where a scribe checks each delivery with careful attention. His face is calm, but his hand moves with the confidence of someone who knows that miscounted grain can ruin a household, a temple, or a career. Numbers are power. The tablet's mystery now turns toward the mathematics of loss. It is not only that humans forgot, it is that forgetting may have followed patterns. Reigns lengthen and shrink. Lists arrange cities in sequence. Ritual calendars divide time into repeated cycles. Flood stories split history into before and later. Everything suggests that ancient memory did not collapse randomly. It was organized, That is more unsettling. A mainstream fact stands beneath the thought. Mesopotamian scribes developed advanced mathematical systems using base 60, which shaped their calculations, astronomy, land measurement, and accounting. Scholars at Yale, Stanford, and Oxford have studied how this numerical tradition influenced timekeeping, geometry, and later scientific habits far beyond Mesopotamia. You still inherit that system. 60 seconds, 60 minutes, a circle divided into degrees. The old numbers remain inside modern life like fossils in speech. You check the time without thinking of clay tablets. You divide hours without smelling reed smoke or barley dust. Yet the structure continues. That is the strange afterlife of ancient mathematics. It survives by becoming ordinary. But the tablet points to another use of number, not practical counting alone, but sacred arrangement. Certain numbers appear with ritual weight: 7, 12, 60, 3,600, enormous rains before the flood, measured generations after it. These are not the casual numbers of a shopkeeper annoyed about lentils. They feel designed to place history inside a cosmic pattern. A list can be a spell in sober clothing. The quirky tidbit is that some ancient mathematical tablets contain exercises that look surprisingly like school puzzles. Students calculated fields, volumes, wages, and interest, which means ancient homework could involve both mudbrick geometry and financial anxiety. Apparently, mathematics has been making people stare quietly at surfaces for thousands of years. The past is not always kind. You imagine a student solving a problem by lamplight. The room smells of oil, dust, and warm clay. His teacher has assigned a calculation about a field's dimensions. Outside, someone is singing too loudly, because someone is always singing too loudly when you're trying to work. The student presses numbers into clay, mistakes one, smooths it over, and tries again. The same culture that counts fields also counts impossible kings. That contrast matters. Sumerian and later Mesopotamian scribes were not naive about numbers. They knew how to manage quantities with practical skill. So when literary traditions present reigns lasting tens of thousands of years, the strangeness is not a simple error. It is deliberate, symbolic, inherited, or attached to an older system whose purpose is no longer fully clear. You feel the number stretching like shadows. A human lifetime is small. A royal reign of thousands of years is not a biography. It is a signal that you have entered another register of time. The early age is not merely long ago. It belongs to a different scale, where human memory fails because human proportion fails. The mind cannot live comfortably in those numbers. Perhaps that is the point. If the first age is measured in impossibility, then it cannot be easily questioned. It can be honoured, recited, arranged, and placed at the beginning of lists, but not inhabited by ordinary memory. Numbers become a fence around the past. They preserve the outline while keeping the listener at a distance. And that's clever. Almost too clever. The tablet's damaged reference to the measure taken from the people now feels more suggestive. Measure can mean proportion, order, assigned fate, or knowledge of proper relationship. If humans lost the measure, they may have lost the ability to see where they truly fit within the cosmic structure. They could still count grain, but not their own origin. Useful mathematics remained. Dangerous mathematics vanished. This is speculation, softly held. The open scholarly debate concerns whether Mesopotamian numerical patterns in myth represent symbolic theology, political ideology, inherited oral structures, or mathematical cosmology. Some researchers argue that enormous reigns elevate royal authority by placing kingship beyond ordinary human scale. Others suggest that scribes arranged early time using sacred numerical frameworks. Another view sees the numbers as memory devices, designed for recitation and teaching. Each idea helps. None finishes the puzzle. You move from the storehouse into a temple court where moonlight lies pale across the bricks. Time is measured differently here, not by sacks and rations, but by festivals, lunar cycles, offerings, and the movements of heavenly bodies. Priests observe, record, and interpret. The sky becomes an archive so vast that clay can only imitate it. Stars and numbers with fire in them. Ancient Mesopotamian astronomy developed through careful observation over long periods. This is not fringe imagination. It is one of the great achievements of ancient scholarship. Yet the astronomical habit also shaped religious thought. The heavens seemed ordered, and order invited interpretation. If stars move by pattern, perhaps kingship moves by pattern. Perhaps memory moves by pattern too. That thought settles gently. Forgetting may not mean chaos. It may mean recalibration. A society might remember according to permitted cycles. Founding Gothkis. Growth. Noise. Correction. Flood. Restoration. Creation. Labour. Knowledge. Covering. Ritual. Renewal. These patterns are not random. They create a rhythm by which people endure uncertainty. The hidden loss becomes part of a larger rhythm, almost musical, almost comforting, almost, because rhythm can soothe what it also conceals. If every age rises and falls by design, then the loss of the first memory feels natural. If the flood must come when the noise grows too great, then the drowning of old knowledge becomes part of order. If kingship descends, moves, withdraws, and returns, then humans learn to accept discontinuity as sacred. The system explains the wound. It does not heal it. In a scribal chamber, an old tablet records numbers from a time beyond the reach of experience. The scribe copying it may not ask whether anyone truly ruled for so many years. His task is not modern verification. His task is preservation of the pattern. The pattern itself carries authority. You watch his stylus move. A great number appears, then another, then a city name, then silence. The strange mathematics of loss work like this. Numbers give shape to what cannot be remembered directly. They turn the hidden timeline into something recitable. They make the unthinkable manageable. They allow a listener to say, there was an earlier age, it lasted beyond ordinary measure, it ended, and now we live in the smaller time. Smaller time is your time. It is the time of bread cooling on a table, a lamp burning down, a child growing taller, a debt coming due, a body becoming tired. It is precious because it is limited, yet its limits may be part of the veil. Humans live inside countable days because the uncountable beginning has been placed beyond them. The storehouse closes for the night. The scribe seals the tablet basket. The moon rises over the plain. Somewhere, water moves through a canal with the soft patience of a counting hand. The city sleeps beneath numbers it does not fully understand, under calendars, rations, rains, omens, measures, and sacred sequences. And beneath all those measures lies the oldest missing sum. What was subtracted from human memory? What number once completed the human name? The temple rises in the moonlight, and its shadow feels older than the city around it. You approach slowly, hearing the hush of sandals on packed earth. The night air smells of baked brick, lamp oil, sheep wool, and the faint sweetness of incense. Above you, the stepped platform climbs toward the dark, not quite touching the stars, but clearly making an argument. The building says that earth can be arranged to face heaven. Stone would have been impressive. Mudbrick is more honest. The ziggurat and its temple complex are not only monuments of belief, they are instruments of memory. Their stairways, courtyards, storerooms, altars, and offering rooms shape the movements of bodies through sacred space. You do not simply enter and understand. You approach by stages. You wait. You pass thresholds. You learn that meaning has levels. A mainstream fact steadies this image. Archaeological research at Mesopotamian sites shows that temples served religious, economic, and administrative roles, storing goods, managing labour, receiving offerings, and anchoring civic identity. Scholars at Harvard, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have described these complexes as central institutions in the development of urban society. The temple remembers for everyone. It keeps the calendar. It guards old songs. It receives the names of donors. It stores grain, cloth, oil, and metal. It records duties, rations, and offerings. It preserves the pattern of festivals, fasts, processions, and purifications. Even if a farmer forgets the exact day, the temple does not. Even if a household loses an old hymn, the priest may still know it. Memory becomes architecture, but architecture can control what it preserves. A temple does not reveal all its rooms to every visitor. A ritual does not explain all its meanings to every witness. A chant may be heard in the courtyard, but its inner interpretation may remain with trained officials. The building gathers knowledge, then distributes it carefully, like water from a locked canal gate. You stand before that gate. A priest passes carrying a small bowl of oil. His robe brushes the wall. The flame of a lamp trembles near his hand. Somewhere within, a statue is washed, clothed, fed, and honoured as the living presence of a god. To modern ears, that may sound strange. To the ancient city, it was maintenance of cosmic relationship. Even gods had schedules, apparently very demanding ones. The quirky tidbit is that divine statues were treated with extraordinary care, receiving meals, garments, perfumes, and music. In some rituals, the god's image was awakened in the morning and settled at night. You can almost imagine a heavenly household where the most important resident never cooks, never cleans, and still expects excellent service. Humanity knew the arrangement well. The temple, then, is a machine of repetition. Morning offerings, evening offerings, monthly festivals, yearly rites, laments in disaster, hymns in victory, purifications after pollution. Processions when divine favour must be displayed, restored, or persuaded to stop being difficult. Through repetition, the temple teaches the city what to remember. It also teaches what not to ask. This does not require deception in a crude sense. The priests may sincerely believe that proper order protects everyone. The scribes may sincerely preserve traditions as they received them. The people may sincerely find comfort in ritual. Yet sincerity does not prevent structure from narrowing access. A locked door can be guarded by honest people. That is the quiet complexity. The Forbidden Tablet's idea of covered knowing now seems less like a single vanished thought, and more like a whole social arrangement. The temple preserves sacred memory, but it also channels it through permitted forms. Human beings are reminded of their place. They bring offerings. They hear hymns. They see smoke rise. They feel the awe of a system larger than themselves. They do not necessarily receive the blueprint. The blueprint remains above, or inside, or both. You walk through an outer courtyard where moonlight collects in pale pools. The bricks are cool underfoot. A low bench lines the wall. A storage room smells of grain and dust. Clay ceilings bear impressions of authority, each one a tiny announcement that someone has counted, approved, and closed. Even the jars seem to belong to a sacred filing system. The temple stores food and meaning together. That pairing matters. A hungry person does not debate metaphysics with enthusiasm. A city that depends on temple grain may accept temple explanations. The same institution that feeds the gods also organizes human distribution. The same scribes who record offerings may preserve myths. Material life and sacred memory are braided so tightly that pulling one strand moves the other. This is not sinister. It is human. Power often grows where necessity and meaning meet. The temple stands there, at the joining place. People need grain. People need blessing. People need calendar, law, identity, and reassurance that the world is not merely a swamp with better accounting. The temple offers all of this, and in return, it becomes the keeper of what the city thinks it knows. An open, scholarly debate surrounds the interpretation of temple power. Some historians emphasize temples as economic engines that coordinated production and redistribution. Others see them primarily as ritual centers whose administrative function supported worship. Another approach studies how ordinary people experience temples through offerings, festivals, vows, and household devotion rather than through elite control alone. The debate is useful because the temple was all these things at once. It was not a simple machine, it was a living institution. Still, the metaphor of a machine remains tempting, especially in the sleepy dark. The ziggurat gathers human movement and directs it upward. The storerooms gather goods and send them through official channels. The scribal rooms gather memory and press it into clay. The sanctuary gathers awe and returns it as obedience, comfort, fear, and belonging. A machine can be beautiful. A machine can also make forgetting feel holy. Imagine a festival night. Torches glow along the temple walls. Musicians play. The smell of incense thickens. People gather in clean garments, carrying offerings. Children stare upward, dazzled by light and height. The old songs begin, and for a while, the whole city seems to remember the same thing together. But what is remembered? The god's power, the city's chosenness, the king's duty, the people's service. The deeper origin remains veiled within the ceremony. It is present as shape, not as explanation. Like a face behind a curtain, it affects the room without showing itself. The ritual may preserve the memory of human creation, limitation, and divine order, while preventing that memory from becoming a question dangerous enough to disturb the city. That is refined forgetting. Not crude erasure. Refined forgetting allows the song to continue. It allows the temple to glow at night. It allows a tired worker to believe his offering matters. It allows a mother to pray for her child. It allows a king to stand beneath heaven with ceremonial confidence. It allows human beings to live within a story, even if the oldest page has been sealed. Perhaps that was mercy. Perhaps it was management. You stand at the base of the temple as the night wind rises. The bricks hold the day's heat in their bodies. Above, the stars turn silently. Inside, tablets sleep in baskets, hymns sleep in memory, and gods sleep in rooms scented with oil and flowers. The temple keeps the city from forgetting completely. It also keeps the forgetting in place. The structure rises layer by layer, as if built from memory itself. Each step says that knowledge has height. Each doorway says that access has conditions. Each offering says that humans are close enough to serve, but not close enough to know everything. And so the temple stands, luminous and patient, preserving the hidden truth by surrounding it with ritual, song, bread, smoke, and silence. A dream opens like a door, and one human steps too near the covered past. You find him not in a throne room, but in the hour before dawn, when even powerful people seem small beneath their blankets. The lamp has burned low. The walls are cool. Outside, a rooster makes an ambitious noise, far too pleased with himself for such an hour. The sleeper turns once, breathes sharply, and sees a city that no waking road can reach. Its walls shine with a light that is not sunlight. Its streets are empty. Its gates are open. He walks through that dream city knowing it is older than his name. No market calls from the lanes. No cartwheels grind against stone. No temple singer lifts a morning hymn. Yet he senses that the place is not abandoned. It is waiting, as if memory itself has taken the form of streets, squares, steps, and sealed doors. Some humans in ancient traditions seem chosen to come close to such edges. They do not fully recover the lost beginning, but they glimpse it through dreams, omens, journeys, or dangerous wisdom. They carry fragments back into the human world, often changed by what they have seen. Their stories become warnings disguised as wonders. A mainstream fact anchors this pattern. Mesopotamian literature gives special importance to dreams, omens, and visionary encounters, especially in royal and scholarly contexts. Researchers at Yale, Harvard, and Oxford have studied how dreams could be interpreted as messages from divine powers, requiring trained readers and careful ritual responses. A dream was not casual. It could be evidence. That is a dangerous way to sleep. You stand beside the dreamer as he reaches a sealed doorway. The door is made of dark wood banded with metal. He places his hand on it and feels cold through his palm. Inside, something hums softly, like many voices speaking underwater. He understands, without being told, that the room contains names once known to humankind. Not personal names, older names. Names for human purpose, human origin, and human measure. The door opens only a finger's width. A breath moves out. He wakes. His room is ordinary again. The lamp is a small red eye. The air smells of wool, ash, and old plaster. His heart beats fast enough to embarrass him. For a moment, he remembers the dream clearly. Then the images begin to blur, as dreams have always done with suspicious efficiency. He reaches for words and finds only fragments. A city, a door, a sound beneath water. The old covered memory has defended itself. Figures like this appear in many forms. A king receives a dream that confirms his rule. A priest sees an omen that warns of danger. A sage understands a sign hidden from others. A hero journeys beyond ordinary limits and returns with knowledge he cannot fully keep. These people almost remember, and their almost remembering becomes part of the tradition, almost as powerful. It keeps longing alive. The quirky fringe tidbit comes from later fascination with ancient dream books. Some collections interpret dream images in astonishingly specific ways, including animals, food, garments, rivers, and strange bodily events. One imagines an exhausted interpreter hearing a client describe an absurd dream involving a donkey, a broken chair, and too much garlic, then calmly searching the tradition for meaning. The sacred and ridiculous often share a room. Dream interpretation mattered because dreams crossed boundaries without permission. A poor worker could dream of a god. A king could dream of ruin. A priest could dream of impurity. The sleeper loses some control over the gates of the mind, and through that weakness, forbidden things may approach. Sleep becomes a crack in the veil. The tablet's suggestion that human knowing was covered does not mean the covering is perfect. Nothing made in myth is ever entirely tidy. The veil thins at certain moments, during dreams, during illness, during grief, during ritual, during the silence before sunrise, when the mind is loose and the world has not yet rebuilt its ordinary walls. That is when people almost remember. A woman grinding grain pauses because a line of song rises in her throat, older than any song her mother taught her. She does not know where it came from. A child draws a symbol in dust and feels suddenly afraid. A king hears a storm at night and believes a god has spoken his hidden name. A dying man asks for a place he has never visited. These are not proofs. They are tremors. Ancient literature often gives such tremors to extraordinary figures. The hero may be stronger, wiser, more restless, or more blessed than others. Yet the core experience is deeply human. Everyone has known a thought that seemed to come from beneath thought. Everyone has woken with a vanishing certainty. Everyone has felt, briefly, that life contains a locked room just beyond speech. The scholarly debate around these visionary moments is subtle. Some historians read them as literary devices that authorize rulers or sacred teachings. Others interpret them as records of real social practices surrounding dream incubation and omen reading. Another approach sees them as ancient explorations of altered consciousness, where human beings met the limits of ordinary memory. That phrase, "the limits of ordinary memory," is enough for this room. The humans who almost remember are not rebels with banners. They are more interesting than that. They are carriers of unease. They ask slightly wrong questions at the right time. They notice repetition. They hear old meanings inside common phrases. They stand before the temple and wonder why awe feels like homesickness. Awe is homesickness. That is the feeling. Perhaps the first human memory is not experienced as information. Perhaps it returns as longing. Not a sentence saying, "Here is what happened," but a pressure in the chest when the stars appear, a sadness near old stones, a strange tenderness toward clay, water, fire, and names. The mind cannot recover the document, so the body remembers the atmosphere. You watch a singer in a temple court. Her voice rises before dawn, clear and low. The hymn is familiar to those who hear it, but one note catches strangely in the air. An old man looks up. A child stops fidgeting. A priest's hand pauses above the offering bowl. For a moment, the song seems to open inward, and everyone present feels something older than the city breathe through them. Then the moment passes. Someone coughs. The ritual continues. This is how almost remembering survives without breaking the world. It comes briefly, clothed in art, dream, omen, grief, or music. It gives humans enough to feel the depth beneath them, but not enough to overturn the order of waking life. The baskets still must be carried. The bread still must be baked. The gods still expect breakfast. They always do. The almost rememberers become dangerous only when they try to explain. Explanation hardens mystery into claims. Claims disturb institutions. A dreamer who says, "I saw a door," may be honoured. A dreamer who says, "The door should be opened for everyone," may become a problem. The boundary keepers are tolerant of symbols. They are less fond of unauthorized access. You sense the warning in that the tablet's hidden world allows glimpses, but not possession. The human mind touches the covered memory and recoils, or is pulled away, or forgets upon waking. The experience leaves stories rather than certainty. Legends accumulate around figures who nearly crossed the threshold. They become kings, sages, flood survivors, lament singers, and nameless dreamers. Each one carries a shard. None carries the whole vessel. The dawn finally enters the dreamer's room. Light touches the wall, then the floor, then the tablet lying beside his sleeping mat. He rises and presses signs into clay while the dream fades behind his eyes. The words he writes are not the full truth. They are what remains when the door closes. A city, a sealed room, a human heart beating against the oldest silence. And in that fragile almost, the forgotten memory continues to search for a mouth. The sound of speech changes, and language becomes less like a river than a gate. You hear voices in the city at morning. A mother calls a child back from the street. A merchant argues over wool with careful indignation. A priest recites a hymn in measured tones. A scribe mutters signs under his breath while copying an old tablet. All of them use words, yet not all words belong to the same world. Some words feed the market. Some words open ritual. Some words remain locked behind training. Language appears generous because everyone speaks. That generosity is a little misleading. In ancient Mesopotamia, speech moved through layers of status, profession, memory, and sacred authority. The farmer knew the language of field and season. The craft worker knew the language of tools and materials. The priest knew formula. The scribe knew signs, lists, and old compositions that ordinary mouths might never hold. The city speaks in levels. A mainstream fact gives this feeling its ground. Sumerian remained a language of scholarship, ritual, and scribal education long after daily speech in much of Mesopotamia had shifted toward Akkadian. Researchers at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied how this preserved language became a prestigious medium for literature, religion, and learned tradition. A remembered language became a controlled language. That is the first lock. You stand inside a schoolroom where a young student repeats ancient words whose everyday meanings no longer live in the streets. The sounds are preserved, but the world that first breathed them has changed. He copies signs from a model tablet, guided by a teacher who corrects his hand and occasionally his optimism. The student learns that old language must be approached through discipline. Discipline is a key. It is also a wall. The forbidden tablet's suggestion that words themselves became barriers now begins to feel possible. Not because language maliciously betrays humans, although it sometimes behaves badly. Rather, language can preserve a truth after the community has lost direct access to it. The words remain. Their first warmth fades. Their grammar survives. Their original force becomes technical, sacred, or obscure. You can hold the shell. The living creature has withdrawn. This happens slowly. A phrase once spoken around hearths becomes archaic. An archaic phrase becomes ceremonial. A ceremonial phrase becomes priestly. A priestly phrase becomes scribal. A scribal phrase becomes a difficult line in a damaged tablet. No one needs to decide to hide it. Time and hierarchy do most of the work, which is convenient for everyone avoiding responsibility. Language is excellent at plausible deniability. The quirky tidbit belongs to the scribe's love of bilingual lists. Some tablets place Sumerian words beside Akkadian equivalents, turning language into a ladder between past and present. Imagine a student staring at a long list of terms for plants, stones, birds, vessels, and official titles, while quietly wondering whether enlightenment was supposed to feel this boring. Sacred learning often wore dull clothing, yet those bilingual lists were powerful. They allowed old texts to survive in a world that no longer spoke them naturally. They also created dependence on trained interpreters. A hymn could be copied, pronounced, and translated, but its meaning passed through scholarly hands. The ancient words became less like common inheritance and more like property held in trust. A trust can protect, a trust can withhold. The city's spoken life flows outside. People bargain, scold, pray, joke, and comfort each other in living speech. Their language is warm with daily need, but inside the temple and school, another language stands in the half-light. It is older, colder, and more formal. It holds names that have been carried so long that carrying has replaced understanding. The tablet may belong to that cold language. Its phrases feel like doors because old sacred words often do. They invite entry, then require training, context, permission, and patience. A line may seem simple in translation, yet behind it stands a whole lost network of associations. A single sign can point towards sound, image, God, place, object, and idea. The sign is small, the shadow is wide. You lean close to one such sign. It may mean name, it may mean destiny, it may mean that which is called into being. The translator pauses. The meaning is not lost entirely, but it has become layered. If human forgetting is tied to names, then this uncertainty matters. To lose the first name of humanity may not mean forgetting a label. It may mean losing the word that explained what humans were in relation to the gods, the earth, labour, and memory itself. A name can be a map. Without it, you still walk. You simply do not know where you began. The scholarly debate here is delicate. Some philologists emphasize that difficult words in ancient texts often reflect scribal convention, poetic compression, or damage, rather than hidden doctrine. Historians of religion, however, note that sacred languages frequently create distance between ordinary worship and specialized knowledge. Another interpretation sees linguistic obscurity as a natural result of cultural continuity, lasting longer than everyday comprehension. All three readings can breathe together. The lock may be accidental. The lock may be useful. The lock may become sacred once people stop asking who made it. You enter a small archive room where tablets are arranged in baskets. The air smells of dried clay, reed matting, and old smoke trapped in the plaster. A scribe lifts a tablet and reads aloud in a language that feels formal even to him. He knows the signs. He knows the translation. Yet there are words he treats with reverence because their oldest depth remains beyond easy speech. That reverence preserves the boundary. Some terms are not paraphrased casually. Some divine names are handled with care. Some ritual formulas are recited exactly, because changing them might weaken their power. In such a world, correct speech matters as much as understanding. The mouth must perform what the mind may not fully grasp. That is a strange form of memory. A person can remember with the tongue. The heart remains outside the chamber. Language also divides society by access. Royal inscriptions speak in elevated claims. Legal documents speak in formal structures. Administrative tablets speak in compressed accounting language. Laments speak with grief shaped by tradition. Proverbs speak with sharp little teeth. Each register creates a community of those who understand it. Each leaves others listening from a distance. The forgotten memory could hide among these registers. Perhaps common speech preserved emotional traces. Perhaps ritual speech preserved divine structure. Perhaps royal speech preserved claims of descent. Perhaps scribal speech preserved fragments of the first account. No single form held everything. The whole truth was distributed across tongues that no ordinary life could gather. That distribution is another veil. You hear a street vendor call out bread in plain language. You hear a priest chant a divine title in ceremonial speech. You hear a scribe explain an old word to a student. 3 levels of human sound move through the same afternoon, each necessary, each incomplete. The city is not silent. It is full of speech, yet the speech itself separates. The forbidden tablet seems to whisper that forgetting did not require wordlessness. It required too many kinds of words. Words for work, words for worship, words for rule, words for school, words for dreams, words for omens, words for names no one says outside the proper room. Human beings were surrounded by language, and in that abundance, the first plain truth became harder to find. A lamp flickers near the archive wall. The scribe presses a final sign into damp clay. He reads the line once, softly, to check it. The words are accurate. The signs are preserved. The tablet will dry. It may last beyond empires. Yet the meaning has passed through so many gates that even preservation feels like concealment. Language has saved the memory. Language has locked it away, and you listen in the dimness, hearing the old words move like keys on a ring. Beautiful, heavy, and not yet fitted to the door. The warning begins not as a shout, but as a line pressed too deeply into clay. You feel it under the eye before you understand it. The wedges are sharper here, as though the scribe leaned harder, or the clay was softer, or the hand hesitated and then chose force. Around the line, the tablet is damaged. A corner has gone. A word has broken open. Several signs sit like stones at the edge of a missing bridge. Yet the warning remains. It speaks of the knowledge that unmakes the sleeper. The translation is uncertain, and every careful scholar would place a hand on your shoulder and ask you not to sprint into madness. The words may also mean knowledge that wakes the resting one, disturbs the protected one, or exposes the one set in darkness. Ancient signs rarely behave politely when modern people want certainty. Still, the phrase is haunting. Knowledge that unmakes sleep. You stand in a small chamber where the forbidden tablet lies on a reed mat. The room smells of old ash, wool, drying clay, and the sharp green scent of crushed herbs. A lamp burns low beside the wall. Its flame moves each time someone breathes. No crowd gathers. No priest raises a knife. No dramatic villain smiles in the doorway, which is probably for the best. The real terror is quieter. The tablet seems to suggest that forgetting may have protected humans from something unbearable. Not merely from power, and not only from rebellion. From knowledge too large for human life. A memory that, if restored without preparation, could loosen the mind from ordinary tasks. Ordinary love. And ordinary mercy. That's a darker possibility. A mainstream fact gives this idea a sober frame. Many Mesopotamian texts treat divine knowledge as dangerous, restricted, or requiring ritual preparation. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and Harvard have studied how ancient divination, purification, and temple learning often depended on controlled access, trained interpretation, and strict procedure. Dangerous knowledge needed handling. Like fire, like medicine, like certain relatives during festivals, the tablet's warning may belong to this world of controlled approach. Some truths cannot simply be poured into a person. They must be carried in vessels, surrounded by ritual, softened through symbol, and given only in measure. Too much, too quickly, breaks more than ignorance. It breaks the structure that allowed the person to live. You imagine a worker remembering everything at once. He stands by a canal, basket in hand. The morning is ordinary, bright and dusty. Then the covered memory opens. He sees the first clay. He hears the counsel. He understands the terms of labour, the narrowing of mind, the flood of memory lost, the gatekeepers, the numbers, the temple mechanisms, the names behind names. He sees his own life as one brief spark inside a design older than language. The basket falls. What does he do now? Does he return to work? Does he go home and eat bread with his children? Does he laugh with his neighbour about the stubborn goat? Does he sing the evening hymn as if the words still fit inside his mouth? Or does the restored memory make ordinary life feel impossibly small? This is the mercy and cruelty of the warning. Humans may need limits to remain human. The quirky fringe tidbit here comes from later magical and ritual traditions in Mesopotamia, where spoken formulas, amulets, and hidden names were believed to affect demons, illness, and misfortune. Some tablets give instructions so precise that one imagines an ancient practitioner thinking, yes, obviously the timing, herb, chord, and whispered line all matter, because chaos is very detail-oriented. Ritual detail protects the practitioner. It also protects the patient. The forbidden tablet may be warning that raw memory is not wisdom. A person can know a hidden fact and still be destroyed by it. Wisdom requires proportion. It knows when to reveal, when to veil, when to translate terror into song, and when to let a tired person sleep. Sleep itself becomes sacred air, not ignorance alone. Shelter. You feel the weight of that shift. The story is no longer simply about humans being deprived. It becomes more troubling, because deprivation and protection may look similar from below. A child kept from a dangerous cliff is protected. A prisoner kept from a door is controlled. From inside the locked room, both situations share the same wall. How would humans know the difference? The tablet does not answer. It only warns. The line following the warning may refer to the face that cannot be carried. This could mean a divine presence too overwhelming for humans, or a truth about origin that cannot be held in ordinary consciousness. In many ancient religious traditions, seeing too much of the divine world is perilous. The sacred is not always warm. Sometimes it is too bright. A lamp comforts. The sun blinds. The open scholarly debate around restricted knowledge remains careful. Some historians argue that secrecy protected sacred expertise and institutional authority. Others believe restrictions reflected genuine ritual concern, where improper access was thought to endanger both community and individual. A third view reads such warnings psychologically, as ancient recognition that certain insights can overwhelm the human mind. All these interpretations can exist together. Power uses protection. Protection can become power. The tablet's warning breathes between them. You step deeper into the chamber. The clay surface catches lamplight along its ridges. Each wedge casts a tiny shadow. It is strange to think that shadows can carry meaning for thousands of years. Stranger still to imagine that meaning itself may have been shadowed deliberately, not to destroy it, but to keep it from burning through the world. Perhaps the old memory was too direct. Perhaps it told humans that their purpose was smaller than their longing. Perhaps it showed them that their gods were not gentle caretakers, but powers managing necessity. Perhaps it revealed that civilization began not in freedom, but in assignment. Perhaps it disclosed that human intelligence was both gift and tool, both spark and leash. No wonder the clay hesitates. A fully awakened humanity might refuse every old structure. That could be liberation. It could also be collapse. Fields might go untilled. Rituals might stop. Kings might fall. Temples might empty. Or perhaps people would simply sit in stunned silence, unable to choose breakfast under the pressure of cosmic truth. The universe is not considerate. It rarely checks whether people have eaten. So the warning may say, not yet, not in this form, not without preparation. Let humans remember in dream, song, number, temple, and story. Let them carry fragments. Let them approach slowly, through symbols gentle enough to survive. Let the full face remain veiled until the mind can bear it. And yet, something in you resists, because a managed memory is still managed, a covered truth is still covered. Even if the veil protects, someone decided where to place it. Someone judged human beings unready. Someone benefited from their sleep. The warning may be compassionate, but it is not innocent. The lamp flame leans. The room tightens. On the tablet, the deepest line seems almost personal. It addresses not kings, not priests, not gods, but the clay one who seeks the sealed beginning. That phrase may be reconstructed only partly, but its emotional force is clear. The seeker is human. The seeker is made of earth. The seeker wants to know what was hidden at the start. That seeker is also you, lying in the dark, listening. The warning does not forbid curiosity. It dignifies it by acknowledging the danger. It says the oldest memory is not a treasure chest waiting to be opened with cheerful music. It is a buried chamber where the air may be thin, where the walls may remember too much, where the first name of humankind may not sound comforting when spoken aloud. Perhaps that's why humans forgot, not because they were foolish, not because they were weak, because some memories are heavier than bodies. The chamber fades, the reed mat darkens, the lamp shrinks to a red point. The tablet remains, its warning pressed into clay by a hand that could not know how far the line would travel. It does not give permission. It does not deny hope. It only leaves the seeker with one slow thought. To wake is not always to be free. Sometimes it is to learn the weight of the door. The modern room is white, quiet, and filled with instruments that would have astonished the ancient scribe. You stand beside a table under even light. The clay fragment rests on foam supports, not on a reed mat. A camera waits above it. A computer screen glows nearby. Someone has adjusted the humidity. Someone else has checked the catalogue number twice, because even mysteries must submit to paperwork. The old tablet has entered the age of gloves, databases, and cautious disagreement. This is where wonder becomes patient. A scholar leans close, not as a prophet, but as a reader. She compares signs, photographs, old hand copies, and related tablets from other collections. Her eyes move between wedge and screen. She does not claim too much. She cannot. The clay is broken, and broken evidence punishes certainty. Every missing corner is a small kingdom of possible meanings. The tablet has survived. Its context has not fully survived. That difference matters. Mainstream research confirms that thousands of cuneiform tablets remain unpublished, partially edited, or scattered across museums and university collections. Institutions such as the British Museum, the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, and Oxford have supported major work on cataloguing, imaging, and translating these texts. The archive is immense, but it is not magically complete. History is not a library with perfect shelves. It is more like a storm-damaged storehouse. Some baskets are labelled, some are not. Some tablets are whole, some are fragments. Some belong with pieces across the ocean, which is inconvenient, though very typical of history. The past rarely considers modern filing systems before collapsing. You feel the humility of the work. A single sign may be photographed from different angles. Raking light may reveal a wedge too faint for the naked eye. Three-dimensional imaging can help distinguish damage from writing. Digital databases allow scholars to compare parallels that once required years of travel, letters, and hope. Even so, the human eye remains central. Technology assists, judgment decides. The forbidden tablet now stands at the edge between evidence and imagination. That edge is dangerous, but not forbidden to approach. A careful scholar can say that a phrase appears unusual. She can say a parallel may exist in another composition. She can say that the text belongs to a wider tradition of human creation, divine order, and limited knowledge. She cannot honestly declare the whole lost system proven. This restraint is not boring, it is honourable. The open scholarly debate gathers around genre, translation, and interpretation. Some researchers would classify the fragment as mythological or theological literature. Others might see it as a scribal exercise preserving older phrases. Another group would ask whether the language reflects ritual restriction, political ideology, or a later scholarly meditation on human limits. None of these positions is foolish. Each begins from a different doorway. You watch the scholars disagree politely, which is one of civilization's underrated achievements. One points to a sign and argues for hearing. Another prefers command. A third suggests the damaged mark could belong to a word for knowledge. Someone brings up a parallel from a bilingual list. Someone else warns that the surface may be too worn. Coffee is consumed with quiet urgency. This is how the ancient world returns. Not in one dramatic revelation. In careful friction, the quirky tidbit is that early cuneiform scholars sometimes worked from hand-drawn copies that were themselves interpretive acts. A copyist had to decide what a sign looked like, and later readers might inherit that decision. In other words, ancient ambiguity occasionally passed through modern handwriting, which is a wonderfully human way to complicate eternity. The clay is not the only medium. The scholar's copy becomes part of the tablet's afterlife. So does the museum label. So does the documentary voice. That is a delicate responsibility. To speak of a forbidden tablet is to stand near the border of storytelling and speculation. The phrase invites curiosity, but it can also mislead. Most ancient tablets were not forbidden in the theatrical sense. They were restricted by literacy, training, ritual use, institutional control, or simple burial. Forbidden may mean socially inaccessible, spiritually dangerous, or modernly misunderstood. The word glows. It must be handled gently. You remain in the white room while the old clay waits. On the screen, the enlarged signs look like valleys and ridges. The wedges become landscapes. Their shadows fill with possibility. A line about covered knowing may be philological problem, theological metaphor, or preserved mythic residue. It may be all three at once, because ancient texts rarely respect modern categories. That is the scholar's frustration. It is also the storyteller's invitation. Modern archaeology has changed the way the ancient world is seen. Excavation is slower now, more careful than in the age of heroic digging and regrettable moustaches. Soil layers are recorded, pottery is studied, botanical remains are analysed, administrative tablets are read beside architecture, diet, trade, and environmental data. A myth is no longer floating alone. It is placed within lived society. This gives the tablet more weight, not less. When a text says humans were made for labour, archaeologists can show the labour systems of early cities. When a text speaks of temple order, archives confirm institutions managing goods and people. When a text imagines memory controlled by specialists, scribal schools and restricted literacy give the idea social texture. The mystery gains bones. Still, bones are not the whole body. A debate among historians continues over how far myth can preserve real social memory. Some argue that myths encode broad cultural truths rather than events. Others suggest that repeated motifs may preserve traces of early transformations, such as urbanization, labour organisation, flood disasters, or the rise of kingship. A cautious middle path says myth remembers by reshaping, not by recording. That middle path feels right tonight. The tablet does not give you a newspaper from the dawn of humanity. It gives you a dream shaped by institutions, copied by scribes, damaged by time, and reopened by modern skill. Its truth, if truth is the right word, lies partly in what ancient people needed to explain. Why humans work, why gods are distant, why knowledge is uneven, why memory feels incomplete. These questions are historical. They're also intimate. In the laboratory, a researcher turns the tablet slightly. Light catches one damaged edge. For a second, a wedge appears more clearly. then vanishes as the angle shifts. Everyone leans in. A small silence forms. It is not dramatic enough for impatient viewers, perhaps, but for those who love ancient history, it is a thunderclap in slippers. A mark survives. A reading changes. A door opens a little. The scholars at the edge do not destroy mystery by studying it. They protect it from becoming nonsense. They clear away easy fantasies, but they also reveal how strange the evidence truly is. Their caution lets the tablet remain ancient, rather than becoming a mirror for every modern desire. That is a gift, though not always a flashy one. The room grows darker beyond the windows. The tablet rests again in its support, neither solved nor silent. Around it are notebooks, screens, cameras, catalogue records, and minds trained to doubt themselves. This is fitting. A text about human limits has come into the hands of people whose work depends on admitting limits. Perhaps that is why it still speaks. Not because it proves a hidden world in one stroke, but because it stands where evidence ends and longing begins. It asks scholars to translate carefully. It asks listeners to imagine responsibly. It asks every seeker to accept that the oldest truths may arrive damaged, partial, and wrapped in clay dust. The forbidden tablet remains at the edge, not beyond knowledge, not safely inside it, just there where the light catches the wedge and uncertainty begins to breathe. A drawer opens in a museum basement, and the ancient world inhales again. You hear the soft slide of wood, the small click of a metal handle, the rustle of acid-free paper folded around clay. The room is cooler than the city ever was. Shelves rise in long rows, carrying boxes, trays, tags, numbers, and fragments that look unimpressive until the mind remembers what they are. Messages from vanished hands. The air smells of dust, cardboard, old stone, and quiet care. Fluorescent light falls evenly across the cabinets. Nothing here resembles a golden treasure chamber. There are no jewelled masks, no polished swords, no dramatic statues glaring at intruders. There are only tablets, broken cones, seal impressions, scraps of inscription, and labels written by people trying not to lose track of eternity. Eternity is easily misplaced. You stand beside a curator as she lifts a small tray. Inside are pieces of clay no larger than a thumb. One contains 3 wedges. Another holds part of a name. Another looks blank until light grazes the surface, and suddenly a sign appears like a fish under dark water. Each fragment is too small to satisfy curiosity. Together, they are dangerous. Small things can reopen time. A mainstream fact grounds this scene. Many cuneiform tablets and fragments discovered across Mesopotamia remain in museum collections, university archives, and storage rooms, with ongoing efforts to catalogue, photograph, join, and publish them. Research groups at the University of Pennsylvania, Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have helped build the modern study of these collections through patient scholarly work. The past is not exhausted. That is the important point. The forbidden tablet may not be alone. A missing corner could exist in another drawer. A parallel line may wait inside a school tablet filed under a dull catalogue title. A ritual phrase may survive in a later copy from another city. A name, once thought lost, may sit upside down in a box of unidentified fragments, quietly judging everyone. Clay has patience. It can outweight empires. You move through the storage room, and every cabinet becomes a sleeping archive. One drawer holds administrative tablets about grain, workers, and livestock. Another holds hymns. Another holds legal contracts. Another holds mathematical exercises. Another contains pieces too damaged for confident classification. The ordinary and the sacred lie side by side, because ancient life did not divide itself neatly for modern convenience. A ration tablet may reveal society. A hymn may reveal longing. A broken fragment may reveal the edge of something no category can hold. This is why unopened or unread archives matter. Not every discovery comes from a dramatic new excavation. Sometimes it comes from returning to an old collection with better tools, better questions, or simply fresher eyes. A tablet handled a century ago may yield new readings under improved imaging. A fragment once dismissed as unimportant may become the missing piece of a composition. History can be very theatrical while sitting still. The quirky tidbit belongs to the art of joining fragments. Scholars sometimes identify pieces that belong together by matching clay colour, thickness, handwriting style, breaks, and content. It is the ancient version of an impossible puzzle, except the box lid is missing. Half the pieces are in another country, and no one agrees what the picture should be. A relaxing hobby, clearly, yet when a join is made, the effect can be startling. A line grows longer, a name becomes readable, a verb appears, the text changes from murmur to sentence. The forgotten system gains one more bone. A scholar may spend years studying pieces that most visitors would pass in a display case without pausing. The hidden timeline depends on such patience. You imagine a fragment waiting in a tray. Its surface holds part of a phrase about returning the covered measure. The first word is broken. The final sign is uncertain. Alone, it proves almost nothing. But placed beside another tablet from a different archive, it might echo the same theme. Memory not destroyed, but withheld until a proper turning. A proper turning. The phrase feels like dusk. It suggests that forgetting may not be permanent. It may be cyclical, conditional, or tied to rituals of return. The old texts often imagine time as patterned rather than simply progressive. Cities fall and rise. Kingship moves and returns. Divine favour withdraws and can be restored. Laments become petitions. Destruction becomes rebuilding. Perhaps memory also has seasons. Perhaps the covered knowing sleeps like seed in dry ground. The open scholarly debate here concerns the future of unread tablets and fragmentary archives. Some researchers believe many discoveries ahead will refine known text rather than transform entire fields. Others argue that unpublished collections may still contain major literary, historical, or religious materials. Digital imaging specialists add that even known tablets can become newly legible when photographed under different conditions. All of this keeps the door unclosed. You step from the storage room into a public gallery. Visitors move slowly past glass cases. Some glance, some read labels carefully. Some take photographs without understanding why the object matters, which is fair enough. A clay lump behind glass does not perform for attention. It asks the viewer to bring patience, and patience is not the modern world's strongest muscle. Still, one person stops. She leans toward a tablet. Her reflection appears in the glass, hovering over the ancient signs. She does not know Sumerian. She cannot read the wedges. Yet she feels the distance, and the distance feels strangely personal. Someone once pressed those signs because memory needed a body. Now the body is clay. The human hand is gone. The mark remains. Museum drawers and gallery cases create another layer of forgetting and remembering. They preserve objects outside their original worlds. That preservation is necessary, but it is also incomplete. A tablet removed from its house, temple, school, or archive loses part of its voice. It becomes safe, catalogued, and silent under glass, waiting for interpretation to give back a little of its lost air. The artifact survives. The room around it does not. This is why the imagination must work carefully. It cannot invent freely without becoming dishonest. It cannot refuse to imagine without leaving the object dead. The best approach is slow and respectful. Let the clay speak through what is known. Let uncertainty remain visible. Let possibility glow at the edges without pretending to be proof. The hidden truth, if it exists, may not arrive as one perfect tablet. It may arrive as accumulation, a phrase in one drawer, a number in another, a ritual line from a temple archive, a school exercise copied by a bored student, a flood fragment, a sage list, a damaged warning, each piece small, each incomplete, each carrying a different angle of the same old unease. Humanity forgot. The tablets remembered badly. Modern readers are learning to listen to damaged memory. You return to the basement cabinet. The curator closes one drawer and opens another. Clay tablets rest in neat rows, each wrapped, numbered, and waiting. Some have not been translated fully. Some have not been studied in generations. Some may never say anything grand. They may record sheep, dates, oil, wages, and little administrative irritations, which are still wonderfully human. But among them, perhaps, another fragment sleeps, a corner with the missing verb, a line naming the boundary keepers, a phrase explaining why the covered knowledge could not be returned, a final warning that changes the tone of everything. You cannot know yet. That is the ache and beauty of it. The ancient world is not finished because the archive is not finished. Beneath clay, behind labels, inside drawers, under museum light, the past continues its slow resistance to being fully known. The room grows still. The drawer closes with a soft wooden sigh. In the dark inside, tablets lie quietly, neither lost nor fully found. They wait without urgency, because they belong to a scale of time that makes human impatience look rather adorable. Somewhere among them, the memory not yet returned may still be sleeping. The final image is not a revelation, but a sleeping ember beneath ash. You stand once more before the clay, yet the room around it feels wider now. It contains the plain, the rivers, the scribal schools, the temples, the flood mud, the museum drawers, and every hand that touched the story without owning it. The tablet is still small. The question around it is not, why did humans forget? The old fragment does not answer plainly. It circles the answer like a night bird over dark water. It suggests that memory was covered, not destroyed. It suggests that knowledge was measured, not abandoned. It suggests that human life continued inside a careful narrowing, where work, ritual, language, number, and story preserved enough to live. Enough, but not all. That is the phrase that lingers. A mainstream historical fact steadies the last step. The civilizations of ancient Mesopotamia left one of the richest written archives in the ancient world, with texts on economy, law, kingship, myth, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and ritual. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, Harvard, and the University of Pennsylvania continue to show how these records reveal both daily life and deep religious imagination. The record is vast. The silence is vaster. You look across that silence and begin to understand its shape. Human beings were not portrayed as empty creatures. They were makers, singers, builders, workers, dreamers, and interpreters. They knew the names of tools, rivers, gods, and cities. They counted stars and rations. They built temples that climbed toward heaven. They buried their dead with tenderness. Yet the first memory stayed veiled. Perhaps it was the memory of being made for labour. Perhaps it was the memory of a divine council deciding human limits. Perhaps it was the memory of an older age, placed behind impossible numbers and floodwater. Perhaps it was not one memory at all, but a whole arrangement of truths too large to remain inside ordinary speech. The tablet never says this is the final answer. Ancient clay is wiser than that. The quirky tidbit for this last turning is modest and strangely comforting. Some cuneiform tablets survived because fire hardened them during destruction. A disaster that ruined a building could preserve the writing inside it. Human panic, collapsing roofs, and terrible heat sometimes became the reason a voice lasted for thousands of years. Lost protected memory. That's almost too fitting. The forgotten truth may have survived in the same way, not by remaining pure and whole, but by passing through damage. It burned into myth. It hardened inside ritual. It cracked into fragments. It entered school exercises, king lists, flood stories, temple songs, and strange warnings. Each break made it harder to read. yet each survival kept the question alive. You begin to feel that forgetting is not a wall, it is a landscape. There are hills of ritual, rivers of language, ruins of number, marshes of dream, and deep, buried rooms where names sleep. A person cannot cross it quickly. A civilization cannot map it entirely. But at times, in certain lights, the paths line up. A phrase from one tablet touches a number from another. A myth touches an archaeological layer. A warning touches the private unease of a modern listener. And the old world breathes. The scholarly debate remains open, as it should. Some historians will read the tablet as theology, a meditation on human limits before divine power. Others will read it as social memory, preserving the tension between labouring people and sacred institutions. Another careful view will see it as poetry, using divine drama to speak about the human condition itself. None of these readings destroys the mystery. They deepen it, because the story of forgetting is not only about ancient Mesopotamia. It is about every human life lived between usefulness and longing. You wake, work, eat, worry, love, age, and sleep. You carry tasks assigned by society, family, body, and time. Yet somewhere inside ordinary life, a quieter question persists. What was I before all this naming began? That question may be the memory trying to return, not as a fact, as a pressure, as a homesickness beneath thought. The Forbidden Tablet's most unsettling possibility is also its gentlest. Perhaps humans forgot because remembering everything would have broken the tenderness of daily life. You could not hold a child, bake bread, comfort a friend, or plant a field if the full architecture of existence burned constantly in the mind. Mercy may require shadow, love may require nearness, work may require a narrowed horizon. And yet the narrowing is never complete. A song opens it, a dream troubles it, a ruin exposes it, a line of ancient writing catches lamplight, and suddenly the modern world feels thin. For one breath, you sense that humanity has always lived beside a covered door, decorating it with stories, guarding it with ritual, and pretending not to hear what moves behind it. That pretense is human. So was listening. The tablet returns to stillness. Its signs no longer press for interpretation. They rest. They have carried enough for one night. The ancient scribe has vanished. The city that shaped the words has fallen into dust. The rivers have changed their courses. The gods of the old temples are no longer fed at dawn. Still, the question remains awake. You do not need to solve it. You only need to receive its quietness. Perhaps the story is not about a secret stolen from humankind. Perhaps it is about a memory too large to arrive in one piece. It comes instead through fragments, through clay and dream, through broken lists, through scholars leaning over tablets, through listeners resting in darkness while ancient names move softly in the mind. Now the room grows dimmer, the shelves fade, the clay becomes a small brown shape under gentle light. Beyond it, the plain of Mesopotamia stretches under stars, with canals silvering in the dark and reeds whispering beside slow water. No king speaks now, no council gathers, no scribe corrects a student's trembling hand. The world settles into a breathing silence. You may let the mystery remain unfinished. There is peace in that. The oldest stories do not always close like doors. Some remain open just enough to cool the room. They let in night air, river scent, and the faint feeling that history is not a straight road behind you, but a buried depth beneath your feet. You're not required to descend tonight. You've only looked down and seen that the depth is there. Let the thought soften. Let the tablet sleep. Let the forgotten names rest where they are. Not lost, not returned, only quiet beneath the slow turning of time. The human story continues above them, fragile and warm, carrying bread, grief, laughter, work, prayer, and small acts of kindness across the surface of a very ancient silence. Perhaps one day another fragment will be read. Perhaps it will say less than expected. Perhaps it will say more than anyone is ready to hear. And perhaps, as the lamp fades and the river moves unseen through the dark, the memory that humanity lost is not gone at all. It is sleeping with us, patiently, beneath language, beneath history, beneath the soft clay of the heart. The night settles gently now. Your breathing slows into the rhythm of distant water. The ancient tablet no longer asks anything from you. It rests in its case, in its drawer, in its imagined room, and the marks upon it grow softer as sleep comes nearer. The city outside your thoughts becomes only a low golden line on the horizon. Its temples blur, its streets empty, its lamps fade one by one. You are safe here, far from the floodplain, far from the heavy baskets, far from the counsels that no human ear was meant to hear. The story has carried you through dust, clay, river mist, and moonlit brick. Now it releases you. Nothing must be solved before sleep. Nothing must be remembered tonight. The old questions can wait beneath the ground, wrapped in cool silence and patient darkness. The names can remain unspoken. The doors can remain closed. The stars can keep their slow positions above the plain, and the rivers can move through reeds without explaining themselves. Let the ancient world recede. Let the clay cool. Let the hidden memory sink back into its deep chamber, not as a threat, but as a promise that history still has softness left inside it. You have listened long enough. You have followed the fragments as far as the night allows. And perhaps, somewhere beyond thought, where dreams begin to gather like water in the low fields, the story is still continuing. And perhaps the story is not yet complete.